Chapter 53:24. This time, it was G3 and Yi Qian who got out of the car first and quickly stood guard around the perimeter. Seeing this, Will's gloomy expression improved a little. This is Cyril's factory. I suspect that the person I'm looking for is hidden here. Will pointed at the huge factory in front of them and stared at Xia Jinyuan gloomily. I want you to enter the factory immediately tonight. I'm offering a high salary, so you have to put in the same amount of effort. Xia Jinyuan looked around and said in a cold voice that reeked of blood, "Don't worry, Mr. Will. You pay, and I pay. It's a fair deal. Now we need to discuss it properly because you're too sudden. We need a plan." "Okay, don't worry about me." We'll step back and return to the car. Soon, he got out of the car and stuffed a document that was rustling in the wind, probably a newspaper, into Xia Jinyuan's hands. "This is the factory's blueprint. I think it will be useful to you." Xia Jinyuan raised his eyebrows. He took the blueprint and looked around. "Mr. Will, if we rescue your people, how will you go back? Now, there's only one car here. How do you plan to leave this place? I mean, if we really rescue them, how will we leave?" Will sneered. "I know that my friends might be locked up here. Of course, I have my own plans. If you rescue them, everyone can leave." Okay. Mr. Will seems very confident. Then we believe in you. However, I also have a request. If we still need to protect you, Mr. Will, then we have to pay you double the salary. He raised the price and was not afraid that Will would disagree. In the darkness, Xia Jinyuan stared at Will with cold eyes. He saw all the subtle changes on Will's face. For example, his pupils constricted slightly. That was nervousness. Or the corners of his mouth were pressed down. That was anger. Finally, he closed his eyes and hid his nervousness and anger. "You mercenaries will die from money sooner or later. Take the money you earn and go to God together." "Ha. Thank you for your concern, Mr. Will. If it weren't for the money, we wouldn't have followed you to this godforsaken place without any preparation." Xia Jinyuan laughed heartily. He was unruly and arrogant, but more importantly, he was very confident. He was so confident that Mr. Will thought of the various bloody stories he had heard about this mercenary group and suppressed his impatience. A smile appeared on his face once again. "All right, gentlemen, and that beautiful lady, if I really need your protection, I'll double your pay. Good luck." With that, Will strode back to the car. After closing the car door, Will, who had been smiling, immediately changed his expression. One could vaguely feel that he was struggling in pain. "There's something wrong with him," Yi Qian said with certainty. "He must be hiding something from us." Xia Jinyuan stopped smiling and nodded with gloomy eyes. "Don't touch him. Let's go to the factory first. At present, we can only rely on him to rescue them as soon as possible. According to the information from the higher-ups, the person we're looking for is indeed in Cyril's hands. Inform G3, K7, Z7, and Baihe to come over. Let's plan well. If the person is really here, we'll try to succeed in one go. Otherwise, if we alert the enemy, we'll be in a passive position later." Yi Qian nodded and immediately informed the other comrades to come over. Chapter 53:25. He immediately called T6, who was the first to get out of the car. "It's me. Location confirmed. Assemble immediately." Succinctly, T6 ended the call and immediately rushed to the assembly point based on the location. Yi Qian then informed K7 and hid in the dark to wait for his comrades to arrive. The factory was probably an abandoned one. It was very quiet all around, so quiet that it made them feel a little nervous. Inside the car, Mr. Will looked around closely like a trapped beast. He wanted to struggle to escape, but was unable to do so and kept sinking. His heavy breathing could be heard from inside the car, indicating that he had lost control of his emotions again. No, he had to calm down. He had to calm himself down. It was so quiet that it seemed like there was nothing alive around. Even the few figures running over were as silent as ghosts. Will saw a black figure running in front of the car and let out a long sigh. They were indeed as good as the investigation said. Then they should be able to get the people out successfully. God bless. They would definitely succeed. After the comrades had got out of the car, halfway, gathered again. Xia Jinyuan gestured for them to stay away from the car. T6 looked at the quiet car and let out a deep breath. He said as if relieved of a burden, "It's been so stifling. We can finally get to work." Before he could finish speaking, the sound of a car engine could be heard in the silent night. The 8 of them looked cold and gloomy as they looked at the car in unison. Will, who was holding his cell phone, said as he got out of the car, "Yes, that's right. Keep driving straight until you reach the destroyed steel factory. I'll wait for you here." Someone else was coming. Yi Qian's face darkened. What was Will trying to do? Or did he actually not trust them? So he kept changing his mind? A pickup truck soon appeared in front of them. The lights in the car were turned off and a young man jumped out of the car. It was probably a young man because his steps were very brisk. Will pointed at the young man. "This is my bodyguard, Noah. He's very familiar with this place. It'll save you a lot of time." Noah looked at the illegal mercenaries hired by his boss and took the initiative to greet them. "Hey, mercenaries, how are you? I'm Noah, the boss's bodyguard. I'm very happy to be working with you this time. Before we work together, can you tell me what you're best at?" "Well, I used to be a soldier too. After I retired, I've been protecting my boss. Now that we're working together, I think we should get to know each other better." Z7 was the first to respond. Communication breakthrough. Medic. K7's calm voice followed closely behind Z7. Dynamiter. A cold voice came from G3's mouth. Xia Jinyuan pointed at himself and said unhappily, "I'm their leader. I'm a soldier who crawled out of hundreds of people on the battlefield of the Khan. This is my girlfriend. She likes to kill people. It sounds very powerful." Noah shrugged and said to Will respectfully, "Boss, the people you found should be able to save your friend. Bring them in." Noah's arrival calmed Will down a lot. Even his tone, when speaking to Xia Jinyuan, became gentler. "I'm sorry. I'll only be at ease if he goes in with you. It's all thanks to Noah that I found out that my friend might be hiding here. He was the one who told me. That's why you guys are here. Noah will help you enter the complicated factory. Trust me, with his help, you'll be able to save my friend faster." Chapter 53:26. Noah did have traces of being a soldier, especially his lower jaw, which had been shaved off by a stray bullet. It was obvious that he had been injured by a bullet. He had a pair of blue eyes with a hint of brown. When he spoke, there was a smile at the corner of his mouth. His eyes were very polite as he looked at the other party. You could feel the respect in his eyes, and inadvertently, you could also feel the probing. Yi Qian, who was standing next to him, played with the dagger in his hand and allowed Noah to secretly size him up. Her comrades had all disguised themselves before they set off. For example, her skin was wheat black, and she wore a hood over her head. The wide hood of the hood almost covered her eyes. Noah had to put in some effort to see what she looked like. Plus, they were all standing in the dark. Who could see who clearly? Noah really wanted to see what these illegal mercenaries looked like. Unfortunately, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't see through the darkness. Mr. Will, who was waiting next to them, started to get impatient. He glared at the mercenaries he hired and said in a much fiercer tone, "You can follow Noah now. Quick, don't waste my time." Xia Jinyuan ignored Will and asked Noah abruptly, "You borrowed the car, right? Where did you hide it?" "You have good eyesight." "Of course, I borrowed the car. You might not know where I hid it even if I told you," Noah answered casually. Then he raised his eyebrows. "Why? Do you have any questions?" Xia Jinyuan laughed. His low voice was filled with danger. "It's best if you borrow the car. Otherwise, trouble will easily come looking for you. I think we're on the same page." Noah laughed as well. His laughter was very clean, like a carefree big boy. "I like to work with smart people. My boss also likes to work with smart people. Come on, mercenary. I wish us a happy cooperation." Noah reached out his hand and shook Xia Jinyuan's hand. At that moment, his clean laughter became louder. Yi Qian snorted. "Looks like there's really no one around. You don't even need to hide your laughter." Noah stopped laughing. "Your reminder is timely. I'm so happy to see you that I forgot where I was. You can arrange it yourselves. I just want to see my friends as soon as possible." After Boss Will finished speaking, he turned around and went back to the car. Noah shrugged his shoulders and said to Xia Jinyuan and the others helplessly, Although our boss is very generous, his temper is really bad. If one day I'm fired by him, buddy, can I join your mercenary group? No. Xiao Jinyuan refused. He looked down on him and spoke in a disdainful tone. Noah had a good temper and did not collapse from anger. He replied regretfully, "That's a pity." Glancing at him, Xiao Jinyuan didn't want to talk any more nonsense. If he probed too much, he should show that he was very impatient. He said, "Since everyone is here, tell us about the situation of the factory. We'll take Mr. Will's commission. We'll do our best for him. And you, Mr. Will's bodyguard, stop trying to test me." In the darkness, Noah heard the sound of the gun's safety being pulled. He narrowed his eyes slightly. This guy was indeed the same as the investigation. He was very arrogant and insolent. Noah squinted and laughed again. He was not bothered by Xia Jinyuan's impatience. Okay, we'll get to work right away. Don't you need some good stuff before you start? Like guns, grenades, etc.? Do you need them? You must need them. I don't see any lethal weapons on you. Chapter 53:27. As soon as Noah finished speaking, he heard the sound of countless bullets being loaded. He laughed out loud. Xiao Jinyuan pressed one hand on the map and asked him with hostility, "Bodyguard, what are you laughing at?" "Ha! Sorry, I can't help but want to laugh." Noah ignored the other party's anger and let himself laugh until he calmed down. "You're going in with only a few guns. Have you ever thought about how many guns they have? Do you think you can beat them in a shootout?" Did this group of mercenaries think too simply of Cyril? After he finished laughing, Xia Jinyuan laughed. "Bodyguard, don't you know that the 8 of us like to snatch other people's weapons?" "Oh, sorry, I don't think your boss would tell a bodyguard everything." He really didn't tell him that. Noah's clean smile instantly turned cold. It seemed that Mr. Will hadn't become completely honest. A grenade was suddenly thrown out and landed right next to Noah's feet. He was squatting down with a low-light flashlight, and his first reaction when a grenade was thrown at him was to run away. Noah narrowed his eyes and did the same. However, when he saw the safety pin on the grenade, Noah picked it up and looked at it. "So it's a lethal weapon. It seems that I was too worried. But there's one thing you must need. Wait for me for 3 minutes." After that, Noah ran to the car he drove over. Soon, he came back with 2 hotel bags and unzipped them to reveal the equipment inside. We need a communication device that can keep in touch at all times. The main computer is connected to the boss's business car. This was to tell Xia Jinyuan that we would be able to hear their conversation after they entered work. Wireless communication was indeed a good thing. The 8 of them matched up one by one and adjusted the channel. Noah stopped talking nonsense and finally got to the topic. "Now let's get down to business. The factory is indeed very complicated, but Cyril's people didn't guard the entire factory. His people only guarded one place, and we only need to go to one place. Mr. Will has just given you the factory blueprint. Take a good look, mercenaries. You will definitely need it. From the outside, this looks like an abandoned steel factory, but inside, there's a huge underground drug production center. The underground warehouse has been modified, so we can't enter directly from the entrance. We have to crawl through the sewer. The environment of the sewer is a bit bad. For example, there might be rats and the like. I hope you can stay calm when you step on them and don't scream. Otherwise, we'll be in trouble." After entering from here, Noah's finger traced the floor plan of the factory and said calmly, "There's a 50-meter-long walkway guarded by Cyril's men on both sides. Usually there are about 10 of them. After passing through the walkway, we'll enter the underground factory. We need to take care of the people here before we can enter the underground factory and find the boss's friend. I need to remind you that the entire underground factory is equipped with surveillance cameras, and a control room is 50 meters away from us. As for which room is the control room, I'm sorry, but I don't have the exact information. To be able to obtain the factory blueprint, know the secret route to enter the underground factory, and even find the inside of the underground factory, this was not something an ordinary person could do." Xia Jinyuan took a deep look at Noah. This bodyguard was not simple. Chapter 53:28. After listening to Noah's detailed description, Xia Jinyuan looked at the map of the factory. After looking at it quietly for a few minutes, he began to make arrangements in a low voice. His arrangement was very rough, but it was very fitting for a mercenary. For money, his methods were cruel, bloody, and he didn't think about others. Noah listened quietly, and the suspicion in his heart disappeared a little. These 8 guys shouldn't be a big problem. It was true that Will wanted to find someone to rescue the mother and daughter. The Chinese side might not know what happened, so they didn't take any action. Thinking of this, Noah's expression relaxed a lot. In the car, Mr. Will's tense heart also relaxed a lot. It sounded like these guys were quite reliable. Solve the surveillance room as soon as possible. "Okay, you guard this place. After we kill our way in, you'll be the only one here. I don't want to see anyone else other than you." In front of Noah, Xia Jinyuan erased the numbers behind the code names of all his comrades. K was K7. K7 nodded. He would guard this place, and no one would be able to get past him. Z, take care of serial surveillance and communication facilities. B, protect Z. Z was Z7, and B was Baiha. T and V, you two scout ahead together. Kill everyone you can. G, you help clean up the back. I don't need to see anyone alive who can go out and report. The 3 nodded, indicating that they understood. As for Yi Qian, she and Xia Jinyuan cooperated and followed Noah closely. She and I will enter the underground factory. After we find them, TVG, you guys create a big mess and clean up the surroundings. After we rescue them, Z and B are responsible for providing support. Send them to Mr. Will as soon as possible. We'll clean up the place. I believe Mr. Will be happy to see us turn this place into a sea of fire. His arrangement made Noah's smile grow deeper. A very smart mercenary. This guy must have been a commander in the past, and a very bloody one who liked to destroy things. Will, who was hiding outside, began to wait for a long time. He prayed that God would bless him and that he would be able to successfully rescue them tonight. He hoped that he could send his friend out of Melbourne and that his friend's family could meet soon. Will drew a cross on his chest and held it with both hands, bowing his head in prayer. Yi Qian and the rest followed Noah into the sewer pipe. The 9 of them crawled forward on all 4s. The environment was as bad as Noah had said. Fortunately, this was an abandoned sewer pipe and there was no accumulated sewage. The mouse scurried over the back of his hand, squeaking all the way to an unknown place. No one panicked. They quickly crawled through the complicated sewer pipes. After about 15 minutes, Noah, who was leading the way, whispered, "We're here. Be careful." Exiting the sewer meant entering the heavily guarded underground drug manufacturing factory, which meant that all of them had entered the danger zone. Xia Jinyuan, who came out first, grabbed Yi Qian's hand so that she could stand up with the strength of his arm. His palm was itchy, and he quickly wrote a few words in his palm. Noah might not be Will's bodyguard. Yi Qian quickly finished writing. There was coldness in the depths of her clear black eyes. The 2 of them don't seem to have an employer-employee relationship. Will couldn't control Noah's arrangement at all, but he listened to Noah's arrangement. Xia Jinyuan wrote in Yi Qian's palm. "Find them first. We'll discuss it when we get back." They all felt that something was wrong with Will, and they also saw that there was something wrong with Noah. The relationship between the 2 was complicated and confusing. Will was the key person who could rescue the scientist's wife and child. The Chinese side had to act cautiously and could only rely on Will. Chapter 53:29. Knowing that something was amiss, they had no choice but to proceed. They had to take one step at a time and deal with every move that came their way. After entering the 50-meter corridor, they first encountered the first surveillance camera. Noah, who had hidden well, pointed at it. "There are a total of 3 cameras from here. We can only pass through the 50-meter corridor if we destroy them." Z7 glanced at the camera above and said, "It's not difficult. Leave it to me." After saying that, he stared at the camera closely. As the camera turned, he whispered to the white crane beside him, "Get ready." The white crane nodded and moved in front of Z7. When it heard Z7's command, the white crane immediately rolled under the first camera and stuck close to the wall. Noah was speechless. Did that guy use the blind spot of the camera to pass through? Fortunately, these guys were mercenaries and not sent by the Chinese. Z7 was in charge of communication and could use all kinds of communication equipment. He only needed to observe the rotation of the camera, and he could calculate the angle, time, and blind spot. Then, Z7 rolled over and dodged the surveillance cameras. The two of them quickly sneaked into the surveillance room and took care of serial surveillance personnel at lightning speed. Done. Z7's smug voice came from the headset. Looking at the useless camera, Noah was confident that they would be able to rescue Cyril tonight. Then, Noah was even more convinced of the mercenaries' strength. They moved like ghosts and cooperated well. Before he could react, there were 4 corpses in front of him. He also understood why they said they were used to snatching other people's weapons. Before they even entered the room, they already had 4 AKs in their hands. Noah's expression turned serious. It was already the middle of the night, and the patrolling personnel were gradually showing signs of fatigue. 2 of them even hugged their guns and slept by the corridor. Noah saw that the mercenaries were as easy as killing rabbits. He went around them gently. The 2 of them grabbed each other's heads and twisted them. With 2 cracking sounds, the heads of the 2 unlucky people who were sleeping were twisted at strange angles. Do you need it? Yichien picked up the AK that had been in the hands of the dead target and provocatively handed it to Noah. We will pick up a lot. Do you need it? Noah narrowed his eyes and smiled. He replied gracefully, "Thank you, but I don't think I need it now." Huh. Yichien sneered. She needed it. The white crane covered Z7 until Z7 had shut down all the surveillance cameras in the factory and installed new ones. From the surveillance screen, Z7 could see that there were no problems with the surveillance cameras. After he was done, Z7 heaved a sigh of relief. He guarded the door of the surveillance room, and behind the door were 3 bodies with their necks broken. I'll cut a small window to tell them where there are people and where there aren't. Z7 moved his arms, and his fingers quickly tapped on the computer in the control room. The picture on a monitor screen did not move, but through the small window he cut out, he could see the situation of the entire factory. The 2 of them were wearing the clothes taken off by the surveillance personnel. If there were people passing by outside, it would be difficult to tell that something was amiss. The door of the control room opened. Xia Jinyuan and the others carried in the 6 corpses that they had taken care of. After cleaning up the outside, they quickly left. With Z7's help, Xia Jinyuan and the others dealt with the targets very smoothly. It was so smooth that Noah almost suspected that this was not Cyril's drug manufacturing factory. All the guards were so weak that they could not withstand a single blow. They were massacred by the 8 mercenaries, and no one noticed. Chapter 53:30. No, it wasn't that Cyril's guards were weak. It was just that the mercenaries were too powerful. No wonder they were the most expensive mercenary group in the entire illegal mercenary group. The 8 of them flattened all of Cyril's guards. Even Noah, who was a soldier, was shocked by this. He thought that they would need his help, but it turned out that he was only responsible for leading the way. Z7 was also looking for a place where the scientist's wife and child might be locked up. He pulled up all the surveillance cameras in the underground factory and saw that the production of the drug was in full swing. There were raw materials, semi-finished products, and finished products. Avoid the production room on the left. Go through the corridor. Z7, who had a thin layer of sweat on his forehead, ordered Xia Jinyuan and the others, who were all wearing the uniform of the patrol personnel, to avoid dangerous areas with many people. Noah said, "If we avoid them, we won't be able to find the person we're looking for." He looked at the mercenary leader who had given him a huge surprise. "The person we're looking for is in here. There's no safer place than the production room. We need to go in." The atmosphere was a little tense. Xia Jinyuan looked at Noah like a ferocious beast that would pounce on him at any time. "Are you kidding me?" "I'm serious," Noah replied. Will's displeased voice came from the headset. "Don't you need the expensive commission? A bunch of greedy people. If it weren't for the fact that it's difficult to rescue the person, would I need to risk my life to hire mercenaries to save the person? If you accept my price, then you have to accept the risk behind the price. Isn't that right?" Xia Jinyuan calmed down for a few seconds and said fiercely, "Get to work." Will and Noah breathed a sigh of relief. They were really worried that these fugitives would give up. Fortunately, The temptation of money was great. They didn't give up. Xia Jinyuan glanced at Noah discreetly and then raised his hand to signal his comrades to enter the production room. There were also gunmen guarding the production room. They habitually raised their AKs and looked very intimidating. The busy workers didn't look at them. They were already used to it. As long as they did their jobs, there wouldn't be any problems. Z7 and Baihe held their breaths. K7, who was guarding the sewer pipe, rubbed the gun in his hand. He was ready to fight at any time. T6 and V8 carried their AKs into the production room first. When they entered, several pairs of eyes looked at them. Outside, 2 armed guards passed by the surveillance room. Perhaps they had sensed that something was amiss. They stopped at the door of the surveillance room. The white crane that noticed them coughed softly and gave Z7 a subtle look. Knock, knock, knock. There was a knock on the door. They didn't look behind the door. They were looking at Z7, who was sitting in front of the monitor and speaking in Melabon. Z7 didn't move. Bai didn't move either. There was a snoring sound, and the 2 guards laughed. It turned out that they were lazy and had fallen asleep. Just as they were about to wake them up, they suddenly moved. A cold light flashed in front of their eyes. The 2 guards who were in the middle of pushing suddenly froze. They staggered backward and covered their throats with their hands. Their mouths opened and closed a few times. Blood spurted out from their necks. Their trachea and aorta were instantly cut off. They fell to the ground and died. Chapter 53:31. Baihe cleaned up the scene, pulled up their overalls, and pressed them down on their necks. The spurting blood slowly seeped into the clothes so that it would not stain the ground immediately. Inside the workshop, Xia Jinyuan and Yi Qian walked along the wall one after the other. They looked like ordinary patrolling guards and did not seem to have any problems. Not all the guards knew them, and there was no movement outside. The patrolling guards guarding the workshop took a few glances and did not pay much attention to them. Noah felt that his back was drenched in sweat. 2 patrolling officers walked along the corridor of the production workshop. Just as they were about to bump into him at the corner of the wall, Noah gulped. His sweat gathered into a line and dripped down his chin one drop after another. "Hey!" Someone spoke to Noah. Noah, who was tense all over, stopped and whispered to the mercenary who was walking with him. "G3, walk forward. Do you see the steel door? Think of a way to get in. I'll hold them back." G3 nodded and walked towards the steel door that was so bright that it could reflect one's figure. Noah could speak Melabon's language, so he stopped to talk to the patrolling guard who greeted him. Yi Qian and Xia Jinyuan turned around and walked into the workshop. They hid among the busy workers. With the workers' cover, it was safer. Yi Qian turned off his communicator and secretly took off his earpiece. He whispered to Xia Jinyuan, "We were too impatient this time. We didn't know what was going on before we followed. There's also something wrong with Will. We don't know if Will be waiting for us outside if something happens later. In the past, our identities were different, so we needed to be careful. Now, we are a group of lawless outlaws. We have money to do things, and we have no money to leave. This is what mercenaries are like. We need to do things that are in line with our identity as mercenaries. Think about it carefully. Think about it again and again. That was what we did in the past. What we're doing now is what we should be doing now. Do you understand?" Xia Jinyuan smiled and raised his AK to block the guard's gaze. After passing through the narrow corridor, they saw the steel door that Noah had mentioned. G3 walked past the steel door and turned to face Xia Jinyuan and Yi Qian. Were there really people behind the steel door that they needed to save? Stay calm. There are 11 guards in total. Think of a way to lure them out. G3 whispered as he passed by. Xia Jinyuan nodded slightly and walked past Yi Qian and the other 2. Outside, Z7, who had received the letter, looked at the alarm and smiled. "Leave it to me, comrades." A few seconds later, the sound of an alarm came from outside. The sharp sound made the 11 guards in the workshop rush out with their guns drawn. The alarm came from the area they were in charge of the workshop. The guard who was talking to Noah changed his expression and shouted, "Guard them." He asked Noah to stay behind and rushed out with his gun. Xia Jinyuan and Yi Qian quickened their pace and rushed to the locked steel door. They took out their guns with silencers. Yi Qian hit the center of the steel door's keyhole twice. Just as Yi Qian and the others were about to break through the door, a few guards who rushed out returned. Noah panicked and suddenly fired at the door. The guard who had taken care of the alarm fell to the ground before he could react. G3 no longer had the intention to kill Noah. He cursed loudly, F***CK. Then, he raised his AK and fired at the guards who had come over after hearing the commotion. When the gunshots rang out, the workers in the workshop were so scared that they covered their heads and squatted down one by one. They were very scared, but they seemed to be used to this kind of gunfire. Surprisingly, no one screamed. Chapter 53:32. Xia Jinyuan's gaze swept across the room. He picked up his pistol and shot at a worker who was trying to sneak under the lathe of the production workshop. The worker was trying to report to the outside. Bang! The gunshot rang out, and the worker who was trying to report fell to the ground. Noah shouted in Melibon's language, "Everyone, stay put. Don't move. We'll leave soon. We won't hurt you." He then shouted at Yi Qian, who was still shooting at the steel door's lock. "Damn it. Hurry up. Hurry up." After he finished shouting, he fired wildly at the outside. The guards who came to help fell to the ground one by one. In the car, Will, who had heard the gunshots, could no longer sit still. His forehead was sweating profusely. He took out his handkerchief and wiped his sweat with trembling hands. He kept muttering, "God bless, God bless." Z7, who had seen everything through the surveillance camera, pointed at Noah, who was firing wildly and cursed. "Bastard! Bastard! Damn thing, he ruined our plan. Mr. Will, your stupid bodyguard has done a very stupid thing." After he finished cursing, he turned to Bai He and said, "Quick, go and support them. I'll stay here and tell you where to go." The situation was very dangerous. Bai He nodded, opened the door of the surveillance room, and rushed to the production workshop. Noah had indeed ruined all their plans. Even if there was going to be a fight, it should have started after they found the culprit, not before they found the culprit. The 8 bullets in the pistol were all used up. The steel door's lock was finally broken by Yi Qian. He raised his leg and kicked the steel door hard. Clang! The steel door was kicked open. Yi Qian quickly dodged to the side in case there was an ambush behind the door. "I'll guard it. You go in and look for him." Xia Jinyuan stared the whole scene. He fired from the AK in his hand all the way to the middle of the aisle. He shouted fiercely, "Get up, get up! Everyone squat down in the corner. Quick!" He was speaking in English, which was not Melibon. Noah, who was shooting, repeated his words and roared. With Xia Jinyuan shooting, the crouching workers all trembled and leaned against the corner of the wall with their hands covering their heads. There were at least 30 guards outside who had come to provide support. The white cranes that had rushed overshot all the way from the back, and the guards who were not on guard against their backs fell like grass that had been cut down. Noah didn't have time to look back to see if the steel door was broken. He was sweating and shouting, "Damn it, we have to hurry up. Cyril has 3 poison production chains here, and there are over 100 guards standing guard here. Hurry, quick, find him." Inside the steel door. "I'm sure the person we're looking for is inside the steel door." Xia Jinyuan, who was in control of the factory, did not miss a single word that Noah said. He kept every word in mind and was waiting to settle accounts with him when he got out. Damn it! Encountering an impatient bastard, he could lose his life at any time. Yi Qian had already rushed into the steel door. The steel door was filled with finished products. There were all kinds of colorful pills and white powder. The finished products on the world's poison list could be seen here. Yi Qian, who had been undercover in Myanmar, recognized these finished products. He could identify them with just a glance. Now was not the time to care about the harmful things. She had to find someone. Yi Qian searched the warehouses one by one. Seeing that no one was guarding them, he decided to take the risk and shouted, "Alice Chung! Alice Chung! Oh! Oh! Help! Help! Help!" A weak voice came from the warehouse on the left. Yi Qian rushed there almost instantly. The voice was too weak. Yi Qian searched through 2 smaller warehouses before he heard the weak voice coming from a warehouse filled with junk. Chapter 53:33. Turning on the flashlight in her hand, Yi Jian called out in a low voice, "Alice Chung, you're Alice Chung, aren't you?" Yes, I'm. Help! Help! At the end of the pile of junk, Yi Qian saw a woman with her hands and feet tied up. She looked pale. Yi Qian immediately recognized Alice Chung from the photo. That's right, she was Alice Chung. Find Alice Chung, find Alice Chung. As Yi Qian notified the people outside, he quickly bent down and used a dagger to cut the ropes around Alice Cheng's hands and feet. He said, "Mr. Will asked us to come and save you. He's waiting for you outside." Will? Is that Will? Alice Chung didn't even have the strength to speak. She was so hungry and thirsty that she couldn't find the strength to speak. "Water! Give me water! Give me water!" Yi Qian didn't have any water. Picking up Alice Chung, who didn't expect to walk, Yi Qian heaved a sigh of relief. Although he had been tricked by Noah, at least he had found the scientist's wife. No, what about the child? Where did the child go? Alice Chung, where's your child? Where did he go? I don't know. I don't know. At the mention of her child, Alice Chung burst into tears. She was so weak that she cried as if she was about to stop breathing. Yi Qian's heart sank as he hugged her tightly. He whispered, "We'll find your child. Now we need to get out." Inside the car, Will heard that Alice Chung had been found. He was so happy that he covered his face with his hands and started crying. She was saved. She was saved. She was finally saved. God bless her. God bless her. Coming out of the steel door, Xia Jinyuan shouted, "Retreat," together with G3. He covered Yi Qian as they rushed out of the workshop. With the white cranes shooting from behind, the guards who were attacked from both front and back had no place to hide. They were killed by the AK bullets. Noah brought up the rear and kept urging the people in front to hurry up. Z7 was ready and waiting for their comrades to come out. They moved quickly, including Cyril. The 4 production lines were not in the same place. Instead, they were in the basement of a few other abandoned factories. The gunshots in the basement could not be heard, and the guards in the other 3 production lines would not be able to detect and provide support. "Quick, quick, quick," Noah urged. He knew how powerful Cyril was and how many people he had here. Therefore, he was more nervous than anyone else. He just wanted to leave as soon as possible. They needed to evacuate immediately, so they did not clean up the scene. In the production workshop, after seeing them leave, someone quickly got up and rushed to a certain place. He raised his hand and pressed a red alarm. This was an alarm connected to the other 3 production lines. As long as it was pressed, the other 3 production lines would immediately know that something was wrong. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps could be heard coming from the quiet, abandoned factory. Z7, who was guarding the surveillance room, saw a group of people armed with AK rifles rushing towards them. He pressed down on a microphone beside his mouth and said, "We've been discovered. Retreat, retreat." These were all Cyril's subordinates. Other than leaving some people to guard the production lines, the rest of them surrounded the middle of the factory. Z7, who was constantly watching the surveillance screen, kept telling his comrades about the situation outside. When his comrades appeared in front of him, he raised his gun and destroyed all the surveillance equipment. The first thing he did was to hug Alice Chung with Yi Qian. "K, get ready to provide support." "No problem," K7 replied. He had been guarding the sewer and waiting for his comrades to arrive. Chapter 53-34. The retreat was much faster than the arrival. There were no obstacles in front of them to clear, so K7 arrived to help his comrades. Noah was the first to crawl into the sewer pipe and quickly crawled out. "Quick, quick! I have to be quick! I have to be quick!" He definitely couldn't allow himself to be captured by Cyril. This vicious bastard had many ways to torture his captives. Because the chief of a police station in Melbourne ruined his business once, Cyril led his men to break into the chief's house and killed the chief's entire family. In the end, he cut the chief's flesh bit by bit until he breathed his last. He said that the destroyed drugs were his flesh, so he had to let the chief have a taste of his own medicine. The sewer pipe was the entrance that Noah found. Even Cyril himself didn't know. When Cyril's men rushed to the underground factory, Yi Qian had already crawled out of the pipe and carried Alice Ching out. Mr. Will finally saw his good friend, and he called out to his friend in a sobbing voice, "Alice, my friend, I've finally rescued you. God bless me. God bless me." "Mr. Will, Alice needs water," Yi Qian reminded him. He and K7 walked quickly to the car, with Alice Chung in their arms. This wasn't a good place to talk. There was still danger. They had to leave immediately. The car started. Noah, Will, Alice Chung, V8, and T6 sat in the car. Noah drove them out of the abandoned factory. Yi Qian turned off the communication device and said, "We should be with them. V8 and T6 know that Will and Noah are suspicious." Xia Jinyuan flicked Yi Qian's forehead. "V8 is a scout. He's more suitable to keep an eye on them." This was Xia Jinyuan's arrangement. He still didn't know what Will and Noah were up to, so he didn't dare to let Yi Qian stay with them. Outside, female captives always had a worse fate than male captives. The first G3 to rush out had already driven the car Noah borrowed over. The car didn't stop, but slowed down. Everyone quickly got into the car one after another, and the underground factory that they had destroyed was filled with the stench of blood and gore. Cyril received a phone call and was informed that his factory had been destroyed. At the time, he had pulled out his gun and shot 2 ignorant women who had clung onto him. Cyril only felt slightly better after knowing that the drugs were not damaged and only a few dozen people had died. Moreover, the woman who had been locked up in front of him had disappeared. If it was someone who killed him, he could still tolerate it. But if it was someone who ruined his life, he would definitely not tolerate it. He ordered his subordinates to search the area, and then arranged to find out who dared to cause trouble in his territory. At this time, the Special Forces soldiers who had been fighting intensely for almost an hour had already left the abandoned factory. After the G3 drove some distance away, everyone in the car finally relaxed a little. "Finally, there's an end to this mission," Z7 exhaled and said to Yi Jian, who was sitting beside him. Yi Qian's bright eyes looked at the road in front of him. He shook his head and muttered, "It's still too early to say that. Only when the scientist, his lover, and child are safely brought back to the motherland can we say that we have completed our mission." Z7 smiled and glanced at Yi Qian. "Do you have to be so serious? At least we've safely rescued Alice Chung. The next step is to be careful on the way back. There won't be any big trouble." Chapter 53:35. There won't be a big mess. Yi Qian gently stroked the rifle in his hand, frowning and not saying anything. She didn't know what the relationship between Will and Noah was, and she didn't know who Noah was. Because she didn't know, she felt a little uneasy. Xia Jinyuan knew her uneasiness very well. From Alice Cheng's disappearance to her falling into the hands of a drug dealer, and then Noah, who used to be a soldier, suddenly appearing and testing them several times, his doubts were no less than Yi Qian's. Why did Alice Chung appear in Melbourne? Why did she fall into the hands of a drug dealer? Why did the drug dealer kidnap Alice Chung? There was no connection between the two at all. Noah, who used to be a soldier, suddenly appeared and could make decisions for Will. What was the reason behind this? Yi Qian only wanted to know Noah's identity, but Xia Jinyuan was standing on top of the whole thing, looking down at the whole incident and the various relationships between the two. If he sent the rescued Alice Chung into Noah's hands, would something happen to her? If nothing happened, then the idea that he had vaguely guessed in his heart would not be valid. If something did happen, then the idea in his heart could be further expanded and deepened. The car was someone else's car, so he couldn't ask questions in the car. He could only wait until they returned to the hotel. After resting for a while, Xia Jinyuan said to Bai He, who was sitting next to him, "Contact the car in front and tell him that we're behind him. Ask him to slow down and wait for us to meet up." After a pause, he continued, "G, drive faster and catch up with K as soon as possible." The night sky was dotted with stars, and only the rumbling of the motor could be heard as the night passed. V8, who was contacted by his comrade in the car behind, smiled easily and said, "Mr. Will said that we've already left and there won't be any more problems. Now we'll go to the hospital first and settle the commission." "Ha! I'll use this commission to drink the best wine here and find the most beautiful Melbourne girl. V8 laughed loudly. He hadn't received the money yet, but he was already thinking about how to squander it. Xia Jinyuan laughed. Of course, you can play here for a long time. By the way, lower your voice. Don't forget that there's a lady in your car. Is that lady all right? Does she need your and T's care? V8's eyes moved slightly as he laughed and replied, No. There's no need for us to take care of him at all. Mr. Will is a very attentive gentleman, and there's also his bodyguard, Noah, with him around. T, and I don't need to do anything. Gentlemen, don't forget that Mr. Will is our employer. Please treat your employer seriously, okay? Oh, okay. Thanks for the reminder. T6 replied and turned to look at Will behind him. He waved and said with a smile, Hey, Mr. Will, do you need our help? The commission remains the same. Noah listened to the mercenaries' conversation. Smiling, he looked out of the window. Alice Chung had come out, but the one to take the bait hadn't appeared yet. He took out his phone to check the time before immediately putting it back into his pocket. Will, who was taking care of Alice Chung, saw the phone light flash in the car. His hand trembled violently. Was there a need to continue? Alice Chung was already in this state. Why couldn't they let her go? Why couldn't they let a woman go? Will, who was sitting in the back, showed a pained expression. Chapter 53:36. The car sped all the way from the southern district through the city to the northern district. When they passed by an empty street, a loud bang suddenly rang out in front of them. Immediately after, Yi Qian saw flames rising into the sky not too far away. An ominous feeling rose in Yi Qian's heart. G3, quick! It's our car, quick! The car sped up and arrived at the explosion site. Before G3 could stop the car, their comrades had already jumped out of the car. When he saw the scene in front of him, Xia Jinyuan's face turned cold. The car that had been set ablaze was driven by the V8. Other than a motionless person lying not too far away, everyone else had disappeared. Xia Jinyuan said in a low voice, Qing Niao, go and see who's lying on the ground. Bai He, search the surroundings. G3, come with me to check the situation of the car. The few of them split up. Yi Qian ran towards the person lying on the ground. It was the T6 combatant. The person lying on the ground was the T6 combatant. He squatted down and bent over without moving the T6 combatant or shouting. The first thing he did was to carefully check if the T6 combatant had any serious injuries. He quickly started searching the surroundings. Xia Jinyuan and G3 walked around the burning car. All the doors were open, there was no broken glass on the ground, and there was no damage to the car. This meant that everyone in the car had gotten out, and no one was left in the car. After checking, the two of them looked at each other. Xia Jinyuan said in a low voice, Take a look at the scene again. I'll go and check on the T6 combatant. They nodded. Xia Jinyuan ran over to Yi Qian. How's the situation? Yi Qian stood up and pointed at a black car part next to him. The back of his head is bleeding, and there's hair on the part of the car. He was hit by the car part and was knocked unconscious by the shockwave from the explosion. In other words, this unlucky guy was hit by the car part while he was running and then knocked unconscious by the shockwave. When Xia Jinyuan's eyes flashed with a hint of ruthlessness. Let's go to the hospital first. G3, who had checked the surroundings of the vehicle and confirmed that there was no one in the vehicle, ran over. When he saw that the person lying on the ground was a T6, his expression darkened. How is it? He's alive, but the back of his head was injured. He fainted. Yi Qian's cold voice floated out. Captain Xia, Noah and Will are in big trouble. I know. Xia Jinyuan bent down. G3 also quickly bent down to help the unconscious T6 combatants up. Let's go to the nearest hospital. The problem inside isn't as simple as just the two of them. Yi Qian's eyes turned cold. The white crane, who had found V8's mark nearby, returned. V8 has his eyes on him. There's no problem on his side. After learning that the V8 had left a safety mark, Yi Qian felt much more at ease. With Bai He driving, they sped all the way to the hospital. After they arrived at the hospital, they sent the unconscious T6 into the operating room with the help of the nurses. Outside, Z7 sat on a chair and gritted his teeth. F*CK. Don't let me see the two of them again. If I see them again, I'll skin them alive. At this moment, Yi Qian was calm. Xia Jinyuan sat down and said to Yi Qian, "Tell me what you think." Yi Qian thought for a moment and said slowly, "Our operation has been targeted since the beginning. Otherwise, V8 and the others wouldn't have been ambushed as soon as we rescued Alice Chung. Will and Noah can't get away with it. But I'm more inclined to believe that it has something to do with Noah. Will is Alice Cheng's friend. Alice Cheng's body is so weak that Will wouldn't risk his friend's health. So, it can only be Noah. The ambush on V8 is Noah's force. It doesn't have much to do with Cyril's side." Chapter 53:37. G3 and Z7 agreed that ambush V8 might be Noah's force. However, they needed to know Noah's identity first. Only by knowing Noah's identity and investigating him could they confirm it. G3 pondered for a while and asked Xia Jinyuan, "You should be familiar with Melbourne's environment and forces. Other than Cyril's group, who also want to kidnap Alice Chung?" Before Xia Jinyuan could reply, Z7 said, "According to the information, Alice Chung doesn't have a job. She's always at home taking care of her child. She's just an ordinary housewife. Which organization would want to kidnap her?" "Yes." K7, who had been on guard since the incident, said, "Her husband isn't ordinary." K7, who had cleared up the fog, received the heated gazes of his comrades. Xia Jinyuan narrowed his eyes and smiled with interest. What else? He felt that K7 must have thought of the same thing as him. K7 glanced at Xia Jinyuan. Facing the heated gazes of his comrades, he lowered his gaze unnaturally. Her husband? That would explain. Her husband, a scientist, would explain why someone would want to kidnap a housewife who didn't have a job and only stayed at home taking care of her child. When the fog in front of Yi Jian was cleared by K7, another thought flashed across Yi Jian's mind. Noah was a Caucasian, and he admitted that he was a soldier. Wait, an extremely bold but logical idea formed his mind. Yi Jian looked up and stared at Xia Jinyuan without blinking. He slowly spoke out his thoughts. "I have an idea. It might be bold, but I think it's highly possible." V8 glanced at Yi Jian. Was he about to have a new idea? He was still in a state of confusion. K7 felt that with Yi Jian's intelligence, he wouldn't need to do anything else. He stood there quietly and continued to maintain his favorite silence. G3 exclaimed softly, "What bold idea? Let's hear it. You've always been more meticulous than us. Perhaps your assumption isn't an assumption, but rather, it has always been this way." Xia Jinyuan smiled and looked at her, encouraging her to speak her mind. With K7's hint, with his little fox's intelligence, she must have thought of the key. However, because she was always cautious, she wouldn't say things that she hadn't confirmed yet. That was why she said that the key she thought of was hypothetical. Although she had changed a lot, the caution in her nature had not changed. It was good, but also not good. The good thing was that it would make others feel comfortable listening to her. They would think that she was a girl who was easy to get along with and knew how to take care of others. The bad thing was that if she needed to do something on her own in the future, her cautiousness would easily be seen as too soft by people who were not familiar with her personality, and they would question her arrangements. He would have to have a chat with her later. He needed to know when he could speak cautiously and when he needed to be bold. Since they were in the hospital and she was about to get to the point, Yi Jian lowered her voice even more. She spoke slowly so that even K7, who was standing, could hear every word she said clearly. Noah is a soldier. This soldier is staying by Will's side as a bodyguard. Will is wary of him, so Noah can make decisions for Will. We all know that soldiers are not allowed to go out for no reason. It's the same in every country. For example, if we stay by someone's side, it will be with a mission. So, can we assume that a certain country sent Noah to get close to Will? Chapter 53:38. Other than Xia Jinyuan, the other three comrades were shocked by Yi Qian's bold idea. The silent K7 looked at Yi Qian for a while before slowly retracting his gaze. When he said that Alice Cheng's husband wasn't ordinary, he was only referring to what G3 said. He didn't think of Noah's identity as a soldier and the country behind his identity. G3 slapped his thigh. Even though he suppressed his voice, he couldn't hide the surprise on his face. Yes. Qing Niao's idea is very valid. The key point is that as a soldier, Noah was sent by a certain country to get close to Will. It's completely valid. V8 thought to himself, it seems that my IQ is indeed low. I really didn't think of anything when I used force to make up for it. Yi Qian wasn't done yet. Seeing that his comrades agreed, especially when he saw the smile in his man's eyes, Yi Qian was very happy. Then, why did Noah come into contact with Will? I'll simplify the reason. There are 3 possibilities as to why Alice Chung entered Morgamla. First, Alice Chung escaped with her child, contacted Will, and entered Morgamla with Will's help. However, before the two of them met, Alice Chung and her child were captured by Cyril for some reason. Second, Alice Chung and her child were deliberately released by a certain country that put them under house arrest. Then, they secretly sent Noah and the other soldiers to follow them. They wanted to see who would be helpful to Alice Chung, so that a certain country could immediately control these people who helped Alice Chung. Third, a certain country deliberately released Alice Chung and her child and sent Noah and the others to follow them all the way to see if any country would rescue Alice Chung and her child for the sake of a scientist who was under house arrest. This would allow them to confirm if our country knew that they were holding a scientist who wanted to return to China to work for them. However, because Cyril captured Alice Chung and her child, a certain country couldn't use Alice Chung and her child to confirm if our country knew about it. Therefore, they needed to rescue Alice Chung. No one had any intentions of attacking Yi Qian, because Yi Qian's ideas were completely solid and there were no flaws that could not be found. When Yi Qian saw the expressions on his comrades' faces become more and more serious because of what he said, he knew that his comrades had accepted his idea. So, he voiced out another idea in his mind. And I personally lean towards the third point. Therefore, it can explain how Noah knows about Cyril's underground factory and how he was able to find the underground pipeline that even Cyril didn't know about. Furthermore, he knew about the entire underground factory's internal structure, including the exact location where Alice Chung was imprisoned. This is because there's more than one soldier like Noah operating in the dark. In that case, that would explain the V8 and the others' vehicles. No one in the vehicles left. I think the T6 should have been able to leave as well, but he was unlucky. He was knocked unconscious by the shockwave, and the back of his head was injured by the parts. These are some of my personal thoughts, and they're also my personal thoughts. Take a look and see if these are possible. I'm leaning towards your third point. G3 spoke and looked at Xia Jinyuan. Q King, you should have some thoughts as well. Let's hear them together. If your thoughts are similar to Qing Niao's, then the possibility is at least 50%. Xia Jinyuan's virgin heart was very pleased. He gazed deeply at Yi Qian and nodded. It's not similar, it's exactly the same. I have my suspicions about Noah's identity. It was when he revealed that he was once a soldier that he kept probing us. His goal was to know if we were real mercenaries or if we were soldiers sent by the Chinese to rescue Alice Chung and her child. Chapter 53:39. Although the two of them had the same idea, the way they thought about the problem was completely different. Yi Qian thought that there was something wrong with the person through the incident, while Xia Jinyuan, as the commander, looked for flaws in the conversation and found the crux of the problem by suspecting others. The former was a steady move, while the latter knew in advance and paid attention to it. The latter was more of a leader. Everyone listened very carefully, and Xia Jinyuan said very clearly, the power behind him is the country that puts scientists under house arrest. He followed Alice Chung all the way to Melbourne, and as Qing Yao said, he wanted to know if the Chinese side had taken any action. Alice Chung was suddenly kidnapped by Cyril, and Noah lost the bargaining chip to test the Chinese side. They needed to rescue Alice Chung. As a soldier, Noah couldn't show up, so he let Will find more powerful mercenaries to rescue Alice Chung and the child. I'm afraid it was Noah who told Will to hire mercenaries to rescue Alice Chung. Noah's identity is a soldier, and he was the one who told Will that Alice Chung and the child were kidnapped by Cyril. This shows why Will listened to Noah's arrangement. As soon as he finished speaking, before his comrades could express their opinions, Xia Jinyuan's phone in his pocket vibrated. The buzzing sound made Yi Qian and the others look at Xia Jinyuan's thigh. There weren't many people who knew his phone number. Could it be Will? V8 said tentatively. If Noah is really a soldier of that country, he would have to leave someone to inform us. It could be Will. Xia Jinyuan immediately took out his phone. Yi Qian, who was sitting next to him, leaned over and recognized the number as Will. Will, Yi Qian said softly. Xia Jinyuan pressed the answer button and said in a cold voice, Mr. Will, are you trying to deny our commission by suddenly disappearing? I'm telling you, we're very, very angry right now. Q. Alice Chung has been kidnapped by a group of damned bastards again. Q. I urgently need your help again. In order to show my sincerity, when we meet, I will immediately give you the first payment. Believe me, I never thought of denying your commission. I swear to God, I never thought of it. Xia Jinyuan sneered. She's just a woman. I really can't understand why so many people would want to kidnap her. Also, Mr. Will, she's just your friend, not your woman. Why do you have to pay such an expensive commission again and again? Hey, you're a liar. You and Noah work together to deceive us, just to deny our commission. Let me tell you, we won't be fooled again. Also, hand over my brother right now. Otherwise, you won't be able to sleep from tonight onwards. Will was shocked by Xia Jinyuan. He looked at Noah, who was sitting in front of him, for help. What should he do? The other party wasn't fooled at all. Noah thought for a moment and said in a low voice, ask him where he is now and send the money over immediately. Will, who had received the instruction, gulped and expressed his sincerity in an even more panicky tone. Q, calm down. Please calm down. I'm really not lying to you. I really need your help now. Where are you now? I'll send the money over immediately. I'll send the money over immediately. Other than heavy breathing, there was no other sound on the phone. Just when Will thought that Xia Jinyuan would refuse, he suddenly heard the other party say angrily, okay, I'll give you one last chance. Send the money to the hospital. Now. Immediately. Send it to me immediately. Chapter 5340. In the hospital? Noah was a little surprised. How could there be someone in the hospital? He motioned for Will to ask who was in the hospital. With a sneer, Xia Jinyuan told Will and asked, Mr. Will, Alice Chung was kidnapped again. Besides Cyril, is there any other enemy? Or should I say that Alice Cheng's kidnapper is your enemy? I know that there are many organizations in Melbourne, and there are even other organizations. Did you do something stupid to be targeted by these organizations? Also, who is Alice Chung? Is her identity special? Someone knew that the news of her coming to Melbourne was leaked, so someone kidnapped her through some gangs in Melbourne. If she's really important, then it's possible that she's a mafia organization in Melbourne, or even an organization from another country is involved. You don't have to answer me all the time. You just need to answer me. Is Alice Chung an ordinary woman or not? Will was sweating profusely from Xia Jinyuan's questions. Alice Chung was an ordinary housewife, but her husband was not ordinary at all. Then, how should he say it? If he could, he really wanted to tell the mercenaries who had the ability to rescue Alice Chung that she was now in Noah's hands, and ask him to help rescue her and bring her to the safest place. The safest place was the homeland that her husband wanted to return to, but he couldn't say it. No. Alice Chung is very ordinary. I'm now suspecting that it's my enemy who kidnapped her. Is your brother okay now? When we got out of the car, he was not injured. I really don't know how he got hurt. I'll come to the hospital right now. Please wait for me. Xia Jinyuan replied with an okay and emphasized that he needed to bring all the commissions. I'll wait for your money at the hospital. As for why my friend got hurt, we can only ask him when he wakes up and see if he can provide any clues. You bring the money right now. If you arrive early, we may be able to discuss who kidnapped your friend. Okay, I'll come over right now. Take good care of your brothers. After that, Will hurriedly hung up the phone and looked at Noah. I've done as you asked. Please take good care of my friend. The angry Will stood up, picked up a small black suitcase beside the electric cabinet, and strode away. He really didn't want to see Noah for even a second. Looking at Will's disappearing figure, Noah fell into deep thought. He needed to think carefully about whether he left any flaws for the mercenaries. This group of mercenaries was not simple. He had to be careful and vigilant. Will pushed the door open and left. A tall white man walked over and saluted before asking, "Colonel, should we send someone to keep an eye on him?" "No, no need. He'll come back on his own." Noah frowned and thought for a while. He then ordered, "Catch up with Will and ask him to find a way to lure those mercenaries to our hotel." As long as the mercenaries were in his sight, he would be more at ease. Will wanted to punch Noah in the face. An hour later, Will, who was holding back his anger, arrived at the hospital. He handed the small black suitcase with all the commissions to Xia Jinyuan, indicating that he really had no intention of denying it. Chapter 53:41. Will handed the small black briefcase containing the commission to Xia Jinyuan. The two of them talked back and forth in the hospital. He also told Xia Jinyuan that in order to better express his sincerity, he had already booked a hotel for them. They were all presidential suites, and he hoped that they would stay there. He was so sincere that he even prepared a hotel. Xia Jinyuan, who quickly exchanged glances with G3, pretended to consider it and didn't agree immediately. When Will saw this, he thought of Noah's instructions. He cursed Noah in his heart. Damned thing. His face revealed an unbearable sadness. "I really don't have any other ideas. I can only rely on you guys to help me save Alice Chung." "Didn't you ask me who Alice Chung was on the phone just now?" "I'm sorry, Q. I lied to you just now. God bless me. Luckily, only one of you is injured. God bless me. God bless me." After that, Will closed his eyes and drew a cross in front of his chest. In front of God, Will was very pious. However, the Special Forces of the Snowfield Brigade obtained two pieces of information from his words. First, Will and the others didn't discover V8 and thought that V8 was with them. Second, Will wanted to tell them Alice Cheng's true identity. They didn't discover V8, which meant that V8 was temporarily safe. Another question arose. Who told Will to tell them Alice Cheng's true identity? Noah was the most likely. The Special Forces of the Snowfield Brigade looked slightly gloomy. Yi Qian received a secret look from G3. She rushed out from the side like a lioness. Without a word, she punched Will in the stomach and shouted angrily, "You damned liar! How dare you lie to us?" She wanted to continue punching Will, but Xia Jinyuan hugged her waist. Yi Qian raised her legs and kicked Will, who was bent over from her punch. He was in so much pain that he couldn't straighten his chest for a long time. "Calm down, baby, calm down." Xia Jinyuan, who was laughing in his heart, hugged Yi Jian's slender waist and lifted her up. He held her tightly in his arms and said, "Don't be angry, don't be angry. Although Mr. Will deceived us, we have to forgive him for the sake of money." "All right, baby, you can calm down now. For the sake of money, you need to calm down." In the hospital, Yi Qian used her words and actions to vividly portray the violent temperament of a female assassin who liked to kill people whenever she disagreed with them. It was as if it was real. Will, who was in so much pain that he suspected that he had internal bleeding from the punch, hated Noah to the point that he wanted to ask the mercenary in front of him to help him deal with him. Damn it. If it wasn't for him, Alice Chung would have been rescued and sent to a safe place. Yi Qian did not calm down so easily. He shouted again, "He hasn't come out of the operating theater yet. He hasn't come out of the operating theater yet." He should have told us that Alice Chung wasn't simple. We would have taken precautions and wouldn't have let T be in danger. He didn't mention V8. Will, Noah, and the others didn't know that V8 was holed up in the hotel and was watching Noah. Seeing Yi Qian's violent temper, Will, who was helped up by G3, decided to stay away from him. Leaning against the wall of the hospital, he held onto the soft handrail installed on the wall for patients to walk around. Will looked at Yi Qian, who was still jumping around and flailing his arms. He was in a sorry state. "I'm sorry, I've realized my mistake. Alice Chung is really just an ordinary housewife. It's just that. It's just that her husband isn't ordinary. I'm now suspecting that she was kidnapped again because of her husband. Chapter 5342. Just as the Snowfield Brigade Special Forces had guessed, if it weren't for Noah's instructions, Will wouldn't have revealed Alice Chang's identity. After he finished speaking, a doctor wearing a white coat and a mask walked over from the corridor around the corner of the hospital. He was tall and walked at a fast pace. As he walked, he flipped through the documents in his hand. His gaze seemed to inadvertently glance at Xia Jinyuan and the others before he lowered his head and flipped through the documents. Xia Jinyuan and the others didn't seem to notice the doctor. It was normal for doctors to come and go in the hospital. However, just as the doctor was about to pass by them, Xia Jinyuan, who was still hugging Yi Qin tightly, nodded and promised Will, "Okay, since Mr. Will is so sincere, we will stay in the hotel you arranged." After he finished speaking, he quickly kissed Yi Qin. "Baby, the presidential suite. Are you satisfied?" Witnessing their captain's show of affection again, his comrades secretly clenched their fists. Kiss, 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 kiss again. He really kisses whenever he finds an opportunity. Yi Qin elbowed Xia Jinyuan in the chest and stared coldly at Will. "If you dare to lie to us again, I will definitely kill you. Let go. Don't kiss me again. Go and kiss your favorite money." Her tone was fierce, and this was directed at Xia Jinyuan. Xia Jinyuan laughed. His chest hurt a little because of her elbows. When he was hurt, his comrades were happy. "Well done, Qing Yao." In the hotel, Noah sat on the balcony, opened a bottle of red wine, and drank by himself. He looked like he had a lot on his mind. From the time he received the phone call to the time he boarded the plane into Melbourne, he saw Cyril kidnap the surveillance target with his own eyes, and then he checked into the hotel to monitor Will and collect information on Melbourne. Then, when the other brothers entered Melbourne to look for Cyril's whereabouts, he suggested to Will that if he wanted to successfully rescue Alice Chung, he could try to contact some mercenaries. Of course, this was not his idea alone. He only told Will with the approval of his superiors. When they entered Melbourne, they needed to hide their identities well to avoid fighting with the powerful drug dealers in Melbourne. Cyril's influence was huge, so the best way to successfully rescue Alice Chung was to find mercenaries to rescue her. He waited for the mercenaries to enter Melbourne illegally through special means, then used the illegal entry to make the mercenaries obediently listen to the arrangements, and then entered Cyril's underground drug manufacturing factory to carry out the rescue. He felt that every step he took was very cautious and careful, but why did he feel that something was not quite right? Which part of the process went wrong? Why did he have a strong feeling that the people they wanted to lure out had already arrived? But what about the people from a certain country? Why couldn't he find them? Not even a trace of them. China, which was still developing, needed talents too much. They would not give up the opportunity to let talents return to China to work for them. They would definitely take action. But why wasn't there any movement? Or were they already here and they did not notice? There was a knock on the door, and then someone swiped the card and came in. Seeing Noah sitting on the balcony, the person walked straight to the balcony and raised his hand to salute. "Colonel, it has been arranged, but she has been clamoring to see her child. Tell her that the child is in a very safe place. After our matter is over, she will see her child. If she continues to make noise, tell her that the child will be in danger." "Yes, Colonel." The man who came in retreated and told Alice Chung, who had settled down, exactly what Noah said. Chapter 5343. The hotel Noah and the others were staying in was a joint venture hotel. According to the domestic star rating, it was a 5-star hotel. However, Noah did not choose to stay in the presidential suite. Instead, he chose a room with only one room and a small balcony. The room was small, so he could hear any movement immediately. The room was large, like a presidential suite. It was difficult to find any movement outside. Noah naturally had his own plans for Xia Jinyuan and the others to stay in the presidential suite of the hotel. The sound of the door being locked came for the closed room. Noah lowered his head and held a crystal glass. His wrist moved slightly, and the bright red wine in the glass swirled along the wall of the glass. Are they really here? Or is it that they don't know? He said to himself as he drank half a glass of red wine in one gulp. There was a cold and hard color in his green and brown eyes. He didn't believe that he couldn't find those guys from the poor country. According to the plan, they wanted to use Alice Chung to warn a certain country that they were the world's largest country. They had better be obedient at all times and let them know the strength of the world's largest country. From then on, they would bow their heads. In the future, as long as they encountered something related to the interests of their country, even if it involved the interests of a certain country, they would have to obediently make way for the world's largest country. If a certain country was disobedient, their country would suppress and curb it in all aspects. A country that they had never taken seriously or even looked down on actually began to kidnap people. It was simply a joke. However, they had waited for so long. Alice Chung had been in Melbourne for so long. She had even been kidnapped. Why hadn't the people of that country done anything? The kidnapper of Alice Chung was Cyril, who even dared to silence the police chief in Melbourne. Why did he kidnap Alice Chung? What was their purpose? A series of questions kept hovering in Noah's mind. Many questions were like an invisible net thrown on him, making him a little breathless. He had a headache and needed a good rest. Noah, who had no clue at all, got up from the lounge chair on the balcony. When he returned to the room, he looked at the comfortable big bed. No, he was not sleepy. He should go out and let his brain relax. Noah left the room and went to a bar in Melbourne to relax. In the hospital, Yi Qian looked at the man beside her, who had always appeared calm and strong. But at this moment, the expression on his face was becoming more and more serious. She silently reached out her hand and firmly grasped the man's slender fingers, as if to tell him that no matter when or where, she would be by his side, silently supporting him and assisting him. Her tenderness pulled Xia Jinyuan out of his thoughts. He tilted his head and looked at the girl who had been silently by his side, no matter what crisis he faced. Seeing the tenderness in her eyes, he suddenly smiled. He reached out his slender fingers and quietly stroked Yi Qian's soft hair. It wasn't long, but it was so soft that it made his tense heart relax. When he was with her, no matter what kind of emergency he encountered, no matter what kind of dangerous situation he was in, she could always bring him peace. Nothing, I'm just thinking about where we can find a breakthrough later. His low voice came slowly and gently. Xia Jinyuan leaned over and gently kissed Yi Qian's forehead. Are you sleepy? Do you want to sleep in my arms? Chapter 5344. A few hours had passed, and it would be dawn soon. Yi Qian shook his head gently to show that he was not sleepy. He did not say anything, but he tightened his grip on Xia Jinyuan's hand. If you don't want to sleep, then... Xia Jinyuan patted his shoulder and said in a soft voice, Come, lean on my shoulder for a while. T6 should be out soon. On the surface, T6 only had an injury on the back of his head, but after examination, it was found that the powerful airflow caused 2 of his ribs to break. There was also a nail-like steel bar on the left side of his waist. The reason why he did not bleed at that time was because the steel bar was wrapped in elastic flesh, so only a small amount of blood seeped out. The 2 hidden injuries required more time to be treated. Fortunately, there was no problem with his skull. The doctor said that he might have a slight concussion, but he would only know when he woke up. After nearly 2 hours of treatment, T6 was finally pushed out of the operating room. Although he was still unconscious, the moment he was pushed out, everyone waiting at the door let out a long sigh of relief. As long as T6 was still alive, they would get their revenge sooner or later. After getting a detailed understanding of T6's situation from the doctor, Xia Jinyuan turned to Yi Qian, Z7, and G3 and said, T will probably need some time to wake up. Yi Qian and I will stay here to take care of him. G, you, and Z go to the hotel we'll booked for us. Remember what I said before, keep an eye on the people in the hotel. Maybe we can find something from them. For example, finding out Noah's identity. Z7 looked at his comrade, who was lying motionless on the hospital bed, and nodded. Okay, remember to inform us when he wakes up. G and I will keep an eye on the hotel. We'll leave first, be careful. In the randomly selected room, they were still very cautious and did not reveal their real code names. K7 did not join in the conversation. He stood by the bed and picked up the medical record holder to check the T6 surgery progress and the drugs T6 was currently using. G3 patted Xia Jinyuan's shoulder and then looked at K7, who had not moved yet. "K, let's go back to the hotel and rest first. We'll come back later." K7 put down the medical records and nodded slightly when he passed by Xia Jinyuan before leaving the ward. They thought that the fight last night was just an appetizer. The real action was yet to come. They needed to recuperate enough to deal with the increasingly complicated situation. "You can rest for a while now. I'll look after tea." After his comrades left, Xia Jinyuan held Yi Qian's hand and sat down on the only sofa in the ward. For safety reasons, the T6 ward was a single room. Yi Qian shook her head as she sat down. Although she hadn't slept the entire night, she didn't look tired at all. "I don't want to sleep. You should rest for a while. I'll keep an eye on him. Let's go together then." Xia Jinyuan, who was also not sleepy, put his arm around Yi Qian's shoulder and let her rest her head on his shoulder. His lips seemed to be moving slightly. "We have to think of a way to inform the embassy. The comrades who are rescuing the scientists have to be more careful. They're waiting for our country to rescue them." Yi Qian closed her eyes and raised her hand to cover her mouth as she yawned. "We're all being watched. G3 and the others are definitely no exception. The only one who can inform the embassy is V8. Send a letter to V8 and ask him to inform the embassy." She put down her hand and finished her sentence. At the moment, V8 was indeed the only one suitable to inform the embassy. The less they acted, the safer it would be. Time passed quietly just like that, but for those who were waiting, it felt like an eternity. The two of them leaned on each other and waited quietly for T6 to wake up. Chapter 53:45. Both of them did not look too good. Each of them looked more solemn than the other, especially when they were not speaking. It was so solemn that even the air around them seemed tense. If they raised their hands and flicked them lightly, the air would shatter into pieces and fall to the ground. The T6 combatant, who was covered with a white blanket, lay motionless on the bed. If one did not look closely, they would almost think that he was not even breathing. Looking at the T6 combatant like this, another image kept flashing through Xia Jinyuan's mind. One winter, his comrade was also lying motionless on the bed like he was asleep. Xia Jinyuan looked at him from afar and did not even have the courage to take a step forward. During that winter, he had lost his comrade, the J5, forever. Time could not be turned back, and life could not be extended. His comrade had fallen on the battlefield and would never return. The pain of having his liver and intestines torn apart was nothing compared to this. It was the same hospital bed and the same white blanket. How could it be so similar? Even when he recalled it a little, the pain still felt like his flesh was being cut. Xia Jinyuan hugged Yi Qian, who was resting on his shoulder, tightly and quietly clenched his other hand. When he thought of the J5, Yi Qian also thought of the J5. When he thought of that scene that made him feel like the world was falling apart, the pain in his heart continued. The word sacrifice was heavy, but behind it was the sorrow of his comrade. The comrade who had once fought side by side with him, talked and laughed with him, endured hardships with him, and enjoyed blessings with him, had fallen. From then on, he could no longer hear the other's voice. The pain of losing someone forever was something that those who had never experienced would not be able to understand. At that moment, she picked up the cold J5 at the airport. He was lying motionless, his body cold and without any warmth. His life had come to an abrupt end in his prime. When she draped the bright red national flag over the J5's body, tears streamed down her face like a broken dam. If only the J5 was as lucky as her to be reborn. How great would that be? How great would that be? The corners of Yi Qian's eyes were moist. He raised his hand and wiped away the tears that had unknowingly flowed out. Looking at the motionless T6 combatant lying on the bed, Yi Qian smiled with tears in his eyes. His smile was like a peach blossom in full bloom in spring, so bright that it was intoxicating. That's good. That's really good. She was waiting for T6 to wake up. She was waiting for T6 to continue fighting side by side with her after he woke up. They would continue to share blessings and misfortunes together. Her action of wiping away her tears made Xia Jinyuan look over. Seeing that her eyes were red, Xia Jinyuan pulled her into his embrace and asked, "Why are you crying?" He asked gently. "I remember some things from the past." Yi Qian replied with a smile. "I couldn't help but cry. Then I thought of some happy things and couldn't help but smile." Sometimes, the two of them didn't need to explain too much and could understand each other's thoughts. Yi Qian only needed to mention Xia Jinyuan a little to know what she was thinking. "We'll be fine, we'll be fine." He tilted his head and kissed her hair. He didn't say anything else. They would be fine, but who knew what would happen? Sometimes, just because you say you want to be good, it doesn't mean that you can really be good. In modern warfare, there was the possibility of sacrifice on the battlefield at any moment. They who had always lived in a hail of bullets wanted to be fine, but in reality, they were all prepared to sacrifice themselves at any time. As a platoon commander, he was the same. It was the same for Yi Qian. They would all work hard and be fine. If they really had to sacrifice themselves, it would be worth it to have such a group of brothers. Chapter 5346. The T6 combatant woke up an hour and a half after leaving the operating theater. At that time, the two people sitting on the sofa leaned against each other. Even though they were communicating in secret, their gazes never left the T6 combatant. If the T6 made a small movement, even a slight movement of his fingers or a fluttering of his eyelashes, the two of them would immediately notice it. Moreover, the T6 combatant who had just woken up from the anesthetic made a sound from his throat. Although it was just a few grunts, it was enough for the two people who had been staring at him to hear it. They both got up at the same time and rushed forward at the same time. Xia Jinyuan stared intently at the T6 combatant's face and did not say anything either. He was waiting for his comrade to open his eyes on his own. Yi Qian even held her breath. Perhaps because the T6 combatant was about to wake up, she relaxed and whispered, "Do you think he'll lose his memory? There's a possibility that he'll lose his memory if he hits his head. Don't think he won't recognize us when he opens his eyes." Xia Jinyuan did not know whether to laugh or cry. No, that's only possible if he's seriously injured. He only got hit once and didn't even hurt his skull, so he won't lose his memory. That might not be the case. If he's unlucky enough to get hit in the back of the head by the front fender, he might also lose his memory. Yi Qian muttered softly as she waited for the T6 combatant to wake up. He might also hit his nerves and not be able to speak properly in the future. Xia Jinyuan was speechless. This time, he really did not know what to say. After a few seconds, Xia Jinyuan said to Yi Qian, "How much do you want him to lose his memory and not be able to speak?" "You're thinking too much." It seemed like she was thinking too much. Yi Qian smiled and said, "It's mainly because the process of waiting for him to wake up is too unbearable. It's inevitable that I'm thinking too much." "Then I'll confirm it for you later," Xia Jinyuan answered with a headache. It was not good for his girl to think too much. Yi Qian was afraid that he would really confirm it, so she quickly shook her head. "No, there's no need. It's better to confirm it. Speaking of which, I'm also a little worried. Then I'll ask him later." Yi Qian answered carefully. Xia Jinyuan nodded solemnly. He had to ask. The T6 combatant groaned again, but still did not open his eyes. Xia Jinyuan could not wait any longer and immediately pinched the T6 combatant's philtrum. "Bro, it's about time you woke up. Don't fucking pretend to be a ghost and scare me to death. My family's baby said that you might lose your memory after hitting the back of your head. Open your F***king eyes and see if you can recognize who I am." His actions were very violent and his tone was very rough. The worry in his voice was also very sincere. Only Xia Jinyuan could do something as awesome as pinching the victim's philtrum when he was still recovering. Yi Qian couldn't bear to look at her. "Stop pinching her. You're going to add to her injuries. The skin is thick, but not that tender. If he doesn't wake up, we need to borrow some external force." Xia Jinyuan pinched the T6 combatant again. Then the T6 combatant who had finally won against the anesthetic, opened his eyes with difficulty. Before he fully regained consciousness, Xia Jinyuan immediately pulled his hand back and gently held the T6 combatant's hand. He said softly, "I'm your boss. Are you all right? Can you hear me now? You didn't lose your memory, right?" Her voice was so soft that Yi Qian got goosebumps all over his body when he heard it. In order to cover up his act of pinching the T6 combatant's philtrum, Captain Xia even used the spring breeze drizzle technique. How evil! The T6 combatant opened his eyes with difficulty and blinked again. He looked at Xia Jinyuan and Yi Qian, who were standing next to him. After a while, he said, "Damn, am I in the hospital?" After saying that, he felt dizzy and even felt like vomiting. He blurted out, "I'm not pregnant, am I? Tell me if you recognize us first." Xia Jinyuan asked. In order to reassure his girlfriend, he should first confirm if the T6 combatant had lost his memory. Chapter 53-47. The T6 combatant, who was resisting the urge to vomit, looked at Xia Jinyuan as though he was looking at an idiot. "I was the one who hit my head, not you." Asking him if he knew the two of them? He must be out of his mind. He didn't lose his memory. Xia Jinyuan turned his head to tell Yi Qian. Then he asked, "It's fine now that you're awake. Can you speak normally now?" "Sorry, bro. I'm not cursing you to have amnesia and not be able to speak, but my girlfriend is just too worried about you." The veins on the T6 combatant's forehead bulged a few times. He gritted his teeth and slowly squeezed out a hoarse voice from his throat. "I'm fine. I can speak, and I didn't lose my memory. I just feel like vomiting. I think I'm pregnant with a fat boy." Damn, how much did he have to fucking hope that he would lose his memory and voice? Xia Jinyuan turned his head to look at Yi Qian again. "Are you relieved now? You still think you're pregnant with a fat boy?" Yi Qian, who was nodding like a chick pecking at rice, quickly replied, "I'm relieved. I'm relieved." This confirmation, she could already see the ferocity in the T6 combatant's eyes. He felt like vomiting, dizzy, and had a mild concussion. The T6 combatant wanted his comrade, who was abnormally concerned about him, to get out of his sight. "Should I get up and smash my head or something? Are all of you expecting me to lose my memory and voice? I'm concerned about you. Don't look like you're enduring humiliation." Xia Jinyuan glanced at him and gestured for Yi Qian to take a look at the door with his eyes. Since they had all come to the hospital to keep an eye on him, there had to be someone walking around outside while they were talking. Yi Qian nodded and pretended to be so agitated by the T6 combatant's awakening that he couldn't help crying as he ran to the door of the ward and stood there. The moment the door opened, a figure walked away about a meter away. Calculating the speed at which Yi Qian rushed from the bedside to the door of the ward and then opened the door to leave, the figure should have only walked about a meter away. Someone had been keeping an eye on him from outside. Yi Qian, who was covering her face and pretending to cry, sneered. Then she did something befitting of her current status. She raised her leg and kicked the soft armrest on the wall as if she was venting her anger. "If you want to damage the public facilities of the hospital, then pay for it. We'll send over a box of commission." It was enough to compensate. As he was leaving, he heard the dong-dong sounds behind him. He turned his head to take a look and finally frowned. If she didn't enter the ward, he wouldn't have a chance to get close to her. In the ward, Xia Jinyuan asked in a low voice, "How much do you remember about the attack? Did you see who attacked you?" The T6 combatant's throat was so itchy that he had a headache. "Bro, can you give me a glass of water first? I've choked on smoke before, and talking to you now is as painful as being cut by a knife." Xia Jinyuan looked at him expressionlessly and got up to pour a glass of water. The T6 combatant couldn't get up, and the hospital was very humane. They added a straw to the patient's glass of water, and he drank more than half of the water through the straw. The T6 combatant, whose throat was in pain, moistened his throat and answered in a tight voice, "I have a deep impression of it, but everything happened too suddenly. When V and B were talking, we slowed down the car. But just as we were about to turn a corner, Alice Chung said she wanted to get out of the car and needed to deal with a personal matter. V parked the car and saw Will and Noah get out of the car. He and I realized that something was wrong and quickly got out of the car. A woman wanted to get out of the car to deal with a personal matter, and two men got out of the car at the same time. Was this normal? It was too abnormal. At that time, the T6 and V8 combatants in the car immediately took a look and got out of the car together. Chapter 53:48. The T6 combatant, who had an injury to the back of his head and broken ribs, slept on a special hollow pillow in the middle. He suppressed the urge to vomit as he recounted how they were attacked. Outside, Yi Qian was still venting his emotions, so the people who were secretly watching them did not have a chance to get close. The T6 combatant, who had just woken up, did not look weak from his injuries. His handsome face was full of the tenacity of a soldier. He spoke very slowly and calmly so that he could conserve his energy better. V8 used the excuse that he also needed to relieve himself as an excuse to get out of the car and speed up. Noah and the others got out of the car on my side. I want to keep an eye on them to see if they were up to any tricks, so I got out a little slower. As soon as I got out of the car, I heard a very familiar voice. I didn't think much of it and just ran. I looked ahead and saw that the shell had locked onto the car. The left front wheel of the car was hit by the shell, and then the car flipped over. I was F***ing unlucky and got hit in the back of my head. I was just half a beat slower and fainted from the shockwave. In a blur, I saw a few men in black carrying Alice Chung away. In other words, the car had stopped because Alice Chung had mentioned that she needed to relieve herself. A woman who had just escaped death should be filled with fear. Even if she needed to relieve herself, she should only want to escape as soon as possible and not ask to get out of the car. Xia Jinyuan's eyes darkened as he thought about it. Did you find anything else? Nothing else. The T6 combatant thought for a while and felt that he should not have missed any other clues, but he was not too sure. My mind is still a little muddled. Let me think about it again. Xia Jinyuan looked at the cup next to him, then picked up the straw and put it to the T6 combatant's mouth. Drink some water. After taking a few sips of water, the T6 combatant closed his eyes and recalled the situation at the time. Suddenly, he opened his eyes and said in a slightly hurried voice, "Alice Chung." I heard Alice Cheng's voice at the time. Noah answered her, but I couldn't hear what exactly he said. From her tone, I could tell that Alice Chung was very angry at the time, but the T6 combatant stopped talking again. His brain was injured and he had a slight concussion. Recalling the situation at the time made him want to vomit even more. Xia Jinyuan could tell that he was in pain and immediately massaged his temples. But she's not afraid. This place is very strange. After the T6 combatant finished talking about the most important thread, he felt like he had just walked out of the water. His forehead was covered in sweat. Xia Jinyuan narrowed his dark eyes. This was getting interesting. Alice Chung, who should be running for her life in fear, suggested getting out of the car. Then the car was attacked. She wasn't afraid, but angry at Noah. Then, could it be that Alice Chung actually knew Noah? While Xia Jinyuan was thinking, Yi Qian finally stopped being schizophrenic and called G3, who had already returned to the hotel. G3 had been waiting for news of T6 awakening. When he saw Yi Qian's call, he immediately picked it up. He's awake? Is everything all right? Yes, he just woke up. His condition is very good. Other than a slight concussion, there aren't many problems. You don't have to worry. Yi Qian answered with a smile. His voice was so loud that the people hiding in the dark could hear him. Have you guys arrived at the hotel? Don't forget to reserve a room for us. After saying that loudly, he turned around and lowered his voice. Be careful. There are people watching the hospital. G3 heaved a sigh of relief and said in a light tone, "We can finally sleep. Tell T that we're worried about him. Give us half of his commission." Chapter 53:49. G3, who was speaking briskly, was also being watched by the hotel staff. From the moment the three of them entered the hotel, their every move was in plain sight, even when they were in the room. Z7 sent a text message to tease them about whether they had installed surveillance cameras in the shower and planned to monitor them from all angles. Well, that was really possible. G3 replied, "We're all the same." Yi Qian, who was in the hospital, immediately understood what he meant. If you're not afraid that he'll come after you, you can tell him what you think. Yi Qian laughed. The eavesdropper dialed a set of numbers to report the situation in the hospital to Noah. In the ward, Xia Jinyuan narrowed his eyes and said slowly, "It seems that our general direction is not wrong, and our breakthrough point is not wrong either. The only thing we missed is a very important person." He spoke in a low voice, and when he finished speaking, there was a sharp glint in his seemingly leisurely voice. He had thought of every detail except for one person, because this person was a victim and also an important person they needed to rescue. Why would they suspect her? "Ms. Alice Chung, what role did you play in this entire incident? Rest well. It'll take at least 3 days for a concussion to get better. I'll give you a week off. We have time, so don't worry, take it slow." Xia Jinyuan tucked T6 in and quickly told him about his and Yi Qian's conjecture. "The hotel might be our breakthrough point. As for you, focus on recuperating. After you're discharged from the hospital in a few days, you'll only be active in the hotel. Keep a close eye on the hotel, but be careful not to alert the enemy." Outside, Yi Qian, who was on the phone, looked at the man who was still talking and continued to stay outside without any intention of going in. Knowing that Yi Qian was watching outside, Xia Jinyuan, who was very relieved, was still talking. When T6 heard that he would only be active in the hotel, he anxiously wanted to say something. Xia Jinyuan said calmly, "You have to find the person who injured you. As for me, I suggest that you don't have to think about anything else for now. Rest well, and try to recover and get discharged as soon as possible. It's better to take revenge on your own. It'll feel better. We need to keep a close eye on the hotel. We just happen to lack someone who can't leave the hotel at any time. Your injury is quite timely. I'll leave the hotel matters to you, and the outside matters to me. We'll fight side by side. No one can't do without the other." Hearing this, the T6 combatant nodded. He had overexerted himself earlier and felt a little dizzy. The T6 combatant slowly closed his eyes. The moment he did so, a cold glint flashed across his eyes. Meanwhile, Xia Jinyuan and Yi Qian also rested together. They had not slept the entire night, so now that T6 had woken up, the two of them could relax and sleep for the night. At night, the two of them still did not return to the hotel. With G3 and the others keeping an eye on the hotel and V8 hiding in the shadows, they did not need to rush back to the hotel. As such, they decided to spend a quiet night in the hospital with T6. Early in the morning, the hospital was quiet. When the first ray of light pierced through the morning fog, Xia Jinyuan and the others welcomed a warm morning. Will arrived at the hospital early in the morning. He first greeted T6 apologetically and took good care of him. When T6 heard his endless chatter, he wanted to chase him away. Yi Qian said impatiently, "Hey, can you stop talking? He needs to rest." Seeing that she was about to flare up again, Xia Jinyuan stepped forward in time to pull Will out of the ward. Chapter 5350. Standing at the end of the aisle, Xia Jinyuan took out a cigarette and handed it to Will. He lit the cigarette in his mouth, took a deep breath, and asked with a cold face, 48 hours have passed. Is there any news about what happened last night? What about Cyril? Is there any movement from him? After taking the cigarette, Will took out his lighter and lit it up. He took a deep puff and slowly exhaled the smoke. We haven't received any news about the attack last night. I went to the site of the incident yesterday to take a look. The destroyed vehicles have been cleared, and even the road has been rolled over. Cyril is very active. We raided his underground factory and rescued Alice Chung, but there was no movement. The destruction of his drug factory was even reported in the local Times. It can be said that all the drug dealers in Melbourne know that Cyril's drug factory was destroyed by a group of people. I heard that Cyril rushed to the underground factory last night. He was so angry that he killed all the men who were in charge of guarding the factory last night. It is said that he mobilized more than 50 people from other places. He said that even if he had to turn Melbourne upside down, he would find the people who destroyed his underground factory last night and hang them all for everyone to see. Q. Our time is very tight, and it is also very dangerous. Cyril is a very ruthless bastard. He said that he would find us, and he will continue to investigate. But you haven't found Alice Chung yet. You still need to stay here. Q, for your safety, I think you need to find my friend immediately and rescue her before you can leave Melbourne. Will's words had his own meaning and also Noah's meaning. The eavesdropper saw that Will had been obedient and sent a text message to Noah. Xia Jinyuan did not express his opinion on the spot. Will, who was afraid that they would not work, was so nervous that he took a deep breath. Q, you can't go back on your words. You are mercenaries, and the work you do is equally dangerous. I gave a high enough commission because I believe in your abilities. Now, if you don't act now, once Cyril finds any clues, it will be very disadvantageous for you. Xia Jinyuan still did not say anything. He looked at the people coming and going in the corridor of the hospital and smoked quietly. No one knew what he was thinking at this time. When the last bit of light from the cigarette was gone, Xia Jinyuan said calmly, Mr. Will, you're right. We've been doing the most dangerous work. I can promise you that I will go and rescue your friend, but greed appeared in his eyes. Our commission will be increased by half. I think we will work harder to rescue your friend. Okay, no problem. Money is not a problem. Will was afraid that he would go back on his word. So he immediately nodded and said, I can pay you half of the commission right away. Wait for me. I'll withdraw the money right now. After saying that, he quickly turned around and left. Money, money. What these mercenaries needed was money. He would give it to them, as long as he, Alice Chung, and his wife, daughter, and son were all fine. He would agree to all the conditions of these mercenaries. Standing in the same place and looking at Will's back, Xia Jinyuan put out the cigarette in his hand and walked back to the ward. Since they were so anxious, he naturally had to cooperate. Will, who was leaving in front, was suddenly pulled by the arm and pulled into a ward at lightning speed. Chapter 53-51. Will, who was suddenly pulled, struggled subconsciously. Suddenly, he thought of something. He raised his hand to struggle, but he put it down helplessly, allowing himself to be pulled into the ward. The person who pulled Will into the ward was a man in a hospital gown and a disposable mask. After pulling Will in, he pulled down the mask that covered his real face. His deep eyes, which were unique to Westerners, stared at Will sharply. How did he answer you? They will rescue my friend. Now, I need to go to the bank to withdraw half of the commission to them. Will was very cold. They're a group of guys who will do anything for money. I just said that I will support half of the commission immediately and ask them to wait for me in the hospital. I've already lied to them. Are you sure you want to continue wasting my time? If they go back on their words, please communicate with them yourself. Alice Chung was in the hands of these guys, and these guys still needed Alice Chung to lure out the person they wanted to lure out. He believed that his friend would be fine for the time being. He, who had been angry and unable to ensure his advantage in the negotiation, could finally vent his dissatisfaction. Will crossed his arms and looked at the Western man who stayed in the hospital to monitor the mercenaries with a cold expression that said, I don't care. The man did not expect Will, who had been unable to raise his head in front of them, to suddenly talk back. He was a little unaccustomed to it and was stunned. He rebuked in a cold tone, Mr. Will, please watch your tone. Nothing good will come out of angering us. Also, think about your friend, Alice Chung. She's your childhood playmate. She even secretly used all of her family's savings to help you tide over your difficulties. She helped you so generously. Do you want her to die for you? Upon hearing Alice Cheng's name, Will's face contorted as though someone had grabbed his life. Is that so? Isn't this the time when you need Alice Chung the most? You need to use her to lure out the person you want to lure out. If Alice Chung dies, your plan will fail. Ah, can you report back when you go back? Can you report back? His eyes became extremely ferocious. He really had enough. Ever since these damn bastards showed up, his life had been terrible. His wife, daughter, and son were all monitored. Even if his son said something to his classmates in school, they would know. His company was invaded by these damn guys. His personal life was completely controlled by them. Now, damn it. Right now, he was like an invisible person who had no privacy in front of these bastards. There was no privacy at all. His best friend, Alice Chung, was captured and used by them. Damned bastards. When will these damned bastards get the hell out of here? Why did they use Alice Chung? What kind of people were they? Why did they want to capture Alice Chung? Is it because of Alice Chung's husband? Who were they trying to force to meet them through Alice Chung? These people had suddenly appeared in his life, and now they were everywhere. They were like dust in the air. He knew they existed, but there was no way to chase them away. He could only watch as they continued to invade his life. Perhaps Will's words had touched the man's nerve. The man, who had a murderous look in his eyes, suddenly reached out and grabbed Will's neck. His expression was particularly fierce. Watch your mouth. There are some things you shouldn't say, because saying them will take your life. Chapter 53-52. Will, who was strangled, was surprisingly calm. He was used to this kind of threat. What had he not experienced in Melbourne? Someone pointed a gun at his head, chased him with a gun, and even locked him up with only a sip of water to drink every day. Ha ha ha. He had experienced everything. It was all thanks to this group of people. Will, who was very calm, looked coldly at the people who had threatened him again. He was sure that these bastards would not kill him now. Will's gaze made the Western man, who was pretending to be impatient, furious. He tightened his grip on Will's neck until Will's eyeballs began to roll back. Seeing Will begin to struggle, the man's face showed some satisfaction. Remember, don't provoke us. Don't say anything in front of those mercenaries. Or else. Will, who was struggling, grabbed the man's hands tightly. Will's voice was squeezed out of his throat with difficulty. Now, other than threatening me, what else can you do? What do you want? What do you want? The Western man loosened his grip and his neck was freed. Will, who was coughing and breathing heavily, heard him say coldly, "You can only live if you cooperate with us. Only by cooperating with us can you live. Your wife, daughter, and son can live. You know what? Yesterday, the new dance teacher in the school praised your daughter. Mr. Will, your daughter was praised. You should be happy." Will, whose eyes became even angrier, was so angry that his body trembled. He felt as if he was standing in the cold wind of Siberia wearing thin clothes. His whole body was cold. Sorry for the delay. Okay, you can go to the bank now to withdraw money to satisfy the mercenaries. Seeing Will's whole body saying, "I'm scared," the Western man was finally satisfied. He took the initiative to open the door of the ward. "Please, Mr. Will." Will, who was in a daze, did not know how to leave the ward. He only knew that this group of people was so powerful that they even planted a teacher in his daughter's school. Who were they? Who were they? What do they want? What do they want? From the moment these people appeared, Will had been wondering who they were and what they were here for. Were they here for Alice Chung's husband? Alice Chung had brought her child to Melbourne for a trip and was kidnapped. He had been trying to contact Alice Chung's husband, but unfortunately, he couldn't reach him because Alice Chung's husband had a very special job. Even as his wife, she couldn't contact him. Then, as a friend, he couldn't contact him. With Alice Chung kidnapped, he had no way of contacting her husband. As a friend, he had to think of a solution himself. His hired bodyguard, Noah, suggested that he could contact mercenaries. Everything changed from here. Noah was no longer his bodyguard. His life was no longer peaceful. Everything was a mess. It was so messy that even their daughter, who was in school, was not safe. Even the teachers who took care of their daughter were planted by them. Will, who was sitting in the car, covered his face with his hands as tears of pain and helplessness flowed out. Right now, other than relying on the mercenaries he had hired, he really felt that he had no one to rely on if these damned bastards continued to threaten him. Chapter 53-53. Will, who was covering his face and crying, had a twisted expression on his face. His eyes were filled with crazy hatred. He would definitely hire powerful mercenaries to kill these guys. He would definitely do it. He would definitely do it. The black car drove out of the hospital and headed straight for the bank. The driver secretly glanced at his boss, sitting in the back through the rearview mirror, and immediately gripped the steering wheel even tighter. His boss seemed to be crying. Meanwhile, in the hospital, Yi Qian was sitting at the door of the ward, playing a single-player game that he had gotten from God knows where. He would swear from time to time, and the sound of the fighting game gave the Western man, who was disguised as a patient, a headache. Why did this woman like to play games? Why was she sitting at the door of the ward playing games? The Western man took out a small black metal object from his pocket. His expression became very serious. The listening device had been in his hands all this time, but he had not found a chance to put it in the ward until now. He had to put it in the ward as soon as possible. Listening to the sound of the game outside, the Western man sat back down on the bed and began to think of a solution. The ward door opened, and a doctor in a white coat came in. The door closed again, silencing all sounds. Yi Qian, who was playing games outside, glanced in front of him before looking away indifferently. He continued his job of distracting others and standing guard in another way. Over the past few days, she had completely split herself apart from her previous self and remade herself into a brand new self. When she got crazy, even Captain Xia secretly said that he did not recognize her anymore. She did not want this to happen either, but who asked him to arrange such a character setting for her? However, it was only because of such a character setting that it was convenient for her to act. Captain Xia's strategic arrangements had never been a problem. In the ward, Xia Jinyuan was talking to the T6 combatant, whose condition had improved greatly. He said in a deep voice, "The situation outside is quite unfavorable for us. I'm worried that Cyril will follow the incident of you being attacked yesterday and come to the hospital. So, if there's nothing serious, we'll be discharged tomorrow. After that, we'll go to the infirmary to get some medical supplies and go back to the hotel to meet up with G, Z, and K. They were all Special Forces soldiers who fought on the front lines. As long as they did not die, all injuries were minor. As long as they could still move, they would move." Hearing that, the T6 combatant with a cold expression raised his right hand and nimbly pulled out the needle that was injecting fluid into his body. He slowly sat up. "I know my own body's condition the best. This injury is nothing. Even if you didn't mention it, I was planning to leave the hospital today." There was no reason for him to stay in the hospital and enjoy himself while his comrades were fighting in the front lines. Kay is still in the hotel, right? He's a talent in this field, so he can get the necessary drugs. I'm going to handle the withdrawal procedures now. I've been wanting to be discharged for a long time. Lying down and not working is too depraved. It doesn't suit me at all. He moved quickly and pulled out the needle even faster. Xia Jinyuan, who planned to be discharged from the hospital tomorrow, stared at the drip and then looked up at the drip bottle. "Can't you finish the drip before pulling it out?" The T6 combatant, who was holding the needle and pressing on the back of his hand, looked up. On the hook of the 4-drip, there were 2 brand new bottles of 4-drip waiting to be fed. Xia Jinyuan patted the T6 combatant on the shoulder and shook his head wordlessly, indicating that he had nothing to say at this moment. The T6 combatant was speechless. "Damn, it seems like I've been treated as an idiot by my captain again." He was just trying to show his determination and was a little impulsive. "Lie down, I'll get the nurse over." Seeing that the T6 combatant was still in a daze, Xia Jinyuan reached out and gently pushed his chest. The T6 combatant obediently lay back down. Chapter 53-54. Yi Qian was still playing games outside. When Xia Jinyuan opened the door, he happened to hear his girlfriend, who had always been civilized, curse in Chinese. Xia Jinyuan was speechless. Lieutenant Colonel Xia, who had opened the door halfway, paused. He wiped his face before opening the door fully and walking out. For the sake of the mission, in order to guard against the whistle in the hospital, and in order to make her character and personality more distinct, his girl had really put in a lot of effort. She had acted so well that he believed her. "Very good, very good." Yi Qian looked up at the man who came out and stood up. "You're done." He pulled out the 4-drip. "I'll go get the nurse. You go in and check on that idiot." Xia Jinyuan leaned over and kissed Yi Qian naturally. "We'll be discharged in the afternoon, and we still have to put on a show." After the kiss, they finished talking. Yi Qian tiptoed and kissed him on the chin. How can this be fast? Why don't you stay for a few more days? The situation outside has changed, so we have to be on guard. When we get to the hotel, Noah's men will be there. If we run into Cyril's men, we'll still have help. If we run into Cyril's men in the hospital, it'll be just the three of us. It'll be a loss. Knowing that Cyril was looking for them everywhere, Xia Jinyuan thought of using Noah to protect himself. The hotel was such a good place. It would be a waste not to stay there. Yi Qian's face darkened slightly. Okay, I got it. Go to your work. The two of them kissed at the door of the ward. After kissing, one of them went to find the nurse while the other went into the ward. The T6 combatant, who was lying on the bed, was expressionless as he watched the entire process. He was a man with a wife. Flirting in front of him would not agitate him at all. Damn, he missed his wife. Yi Qian knew what the T6 combatant was thinking when he saw the expressionless face of the T6 combatant. He coughed awkwardly and told himself that they were really kissing just to talk. Yi Qian, who was thin-skinned, finally felt that his face was no longer burning. He sat by the bed and said softly, "Are you sure you're okay? This is not the time to be impulsive and stubborn." The T6 combatant, who was still expressionless, replied, "I'm lying here, sleeping while watching the two of you flirt with each other every day. If I don't get discharged soon, I'll have a heart attack. Come, I'll prove to you that I can be discharged from the hospital. Don't held me up." After that, the T6 combatant propped himself up with both hands. Although his movements were a little slow, they were still very smooth. Yi Qian calmed down a little. The biggest problem was that the T6 combatant's ribs were fractured. As for the injury on the back of his head, it was not a big problem. The wound was not wrapped with a bandage and was covered with square gauze and tape. From the front, it was impossible to tell that the back of his head was injured. The T6 combatant, whose feet were on the ground, did not stand up immediately. Instead, he took a breather and got up again. Having not gotten out of bed for 2 days, the T6 combatant was so excited that he almost staggered and fell. Yi Qian, who was quick to react, felt her heart skip a beat. She quickly supported him. Fortunately, she was prepared. Otherwise, his ribs would have been damaged again if he fell. Keep pretending. Keep pretending. You can't even stand, yet you want to force yourself out of the hospital? Yi Qian pretended to be angry. Do you want to fall again? Do you want to turn a minor injury into a serious injury? The T6 combatant was so agitated that he wanted to cry even more. I'm definitely not forcing myself. I'm just too excited. Really, I'm not lying to you. Come on, let go of me. I'll show you how to walk. Yi Qian was skeptical, but when she thought of the situation outside, she slowly let go of him. Stand properly. I'll let go now. If you can walk, then walk. If you can't, don't force yourself. She reminded him again and was prepared to help him up at any time. Chapter 53-55. The T6 combatant's injuries were all on his upper body, so he would be fine as long as he walked slowly. He also knew his own condition. He could definitely walk, but he should not walk too fast. After taking a few steps slowly, he walked around the ward again. Not bad. His steps were steady, his complexion was normal, and his breathing was stable. Everything showed that he could indeed get out of bed and walk. He could be discharged. To them, as long as they could walk, they would meet the criteria to be discharged. Being injured and lying in the hospital, only eating and sleeping was too extravagant for them. As long as they could stand up and walk, there would be no problems at all. Outside the ward, a patient wearing a mask walked past. He seemed to have inadvertently turned his head to look inside the ward. Holding the listening device in his palm, he walked past the ward again. Yi Qian, who had been keeping an eye out of the corner of his eye, had a cold look in his eyes. After walking around, the T6 combatant did not put on a brave front. He sat back down on the bed and said solemnly to Yi Qian, who was worried about him, "We're all brothers who have gone through life and death together. The situation is complicated now, and I don't want to drag you guys down with me because of my injuries. I don't want to drag you guys down with me either." Yi Qian did not say anything else. If she were the one who was injured, she would have made the same choice as the T6 combatant. I understand. Have a good rest. He helped the T6 combatant back to the ward and looked at the foredrip that was still not finished. He could not help but chuckle. He's still as impulsive as before. He didn't even check to see if the foredrip was finished before pulling it out. He helped K7 slowly sit down on the bed. The flies outside are quite annoying. I might as well open the door and let him see as much as he wants. He had already said what he needed to say and the plan, so he could see whatever he wanted. The T6 combatant was someone who liked to watch a show. When he heard that, he said happily, "Why don't we play a trick on him?" "No." Yi Qian refused with a smile. "Don't complicate things." After that, he opened the door to the ward openly. Before he could return to the bedside, he heard his man talking loudly as he walked over. He knew he was deliberately talking to the guy who was still walking around in the corridor. "When you guys are discharged in the afternoon, wait for us at the hotel obediently." "That's right. I've had enough of the hospital. When we get to the hotel, we can even drink together." When Whistle, who was walking around, heard this, he loosened his hands in his pockets. Leave the hospital and go to the hotel? With a flash of joy on his face, he lowered his head and coughed lightly. Holding the handrail on the wall, he walked step by step past Xia Jinyuan. These people had had enough of the hospital, and he had had enough of the hospital too. The T6 combatant looked at Xia Jinyuan, who came in, and then looked at the big guy he was pushing. The corners of his mouth twitched a few times. "Wheelchair." He pushed a wheelchair in. Yi Qian turned his head away to prevent the T6 combatant from seeing the uncontrollable smile on his face. Xia Jinyuan said calmly, "I don't think you'll reject good stuff. Of course, you can't refuse because it's not borrowed. I just bought it from the hospital." The nurse who came in with him was a local Mellabon girl. She had dark brown hair and well-defined facial features. She was quite pretty. The corner of the T6 combatant's mouth twitched as he glared at Xia Jinyuan. The next second, he whistled at the nurse. "Hey, beautiful, we meet again." The beautiful nurse raised her eyebrows. "Yes, we meet again, but I don't think I'll see you again soon. Hurry up and leave the hospital." She was just short of telling him to get out of the hospital. The T6 combatant pretended to sigh. "Sigh, I didn't expect to be discharged so soon either." "Beautiful. Let's exchange numbers so we can keep in touch." Chapter 53-56. The way the T6 combatant spoke was exactly like how street hooligans would flirt with innocent girls. Be it his gaze, tone, or behavior, there were no flaws at all. Due to the unique nature of their missions, the special forces of the Snowfield Brigade had to know how to role-play, and role-play was a kind of disguise for them. In this mission, the T6 combatant was a playful guy who liked to flirt with women and was generous with them. This was his weakness, a weakness that would make people look down on him from the bottom of their hearts and make them let down their guard. It could be said that the roles played by each member of the Snowfield Brigade this time had different weaknesses. It was these weaknesses that made it easy for them to disguise themselves and fool the people who were secretly watching them to protect themselves. The open ward door exposed the T6 combatants flirting with the nurse. A look of disgust flashed across the eyes of the patients who were walking around outside the ward. They walked along the wall and returned to their own rooms. The beautiful nurse, who was flirted with by the T6 every time she changed his dressing, kept a smile on her face. She only gave him a few more injections when she gave him another injection. Before she left with a medicine tray, she said an English word to the T6 combatant. The Chinese translation was "get lost." Yi Qian laughed mercilessly while Xia Jinyuan instigated. "Go on, bro, show her what you've got. If you can't win her over with your charm, you can win her over with money." Mr. Will is very sincere. He even paid half of the commission for the next mission in advance. "Bro, you have a lot of money to spend now." The laughter in the hospital bed got even louder. Meanwhile, the Western man in the ward next door told Noah the latest news he had just heard. When Noah heard this, he couldn't help but smile confidently, as if everything was under their control. It would be more convenient for them to monitor their every move if they returned to the hotel. In the afternoon, K7 rushed to the hospital. On the surface, he said he was there to pick up T6 and discharge him, but in reality, he passed all the necessities prescribed by the hospital. considering that T6 wouldn't be so obedient and the situation didn't allow him to stay put. K7 spent a small sum of money to secretly ask the doctor for help and prescribe some anti-inflammatory and hemostatic drugs. Xia Jinyuan pushed the wheelchair to the side of the bed. T6 gritted his teeth and sat in the wheelchair with his hands and feet trembling. After a while, K7 came in with bags of medicine. Before he reached the bed, Xia Jinyuan waved his hand and said, "The procedures are done. Take the medicine and leave the hospital." The T6 combatant, who had been hospitalized for 2 days and 1 night, was discharged from the hospital in a wheelchair under the setting sun. Later, after returning from his mission, he bragged to his comrades, "The most awesome thing I've ever done in my life was getting Q King to push my wheelchair." This bragging continued until he retired from the military for many, many years. He pointed to Xia Jinyuan, who was already a lieutenant general at that time and appeared on the national military news channel from time to time, and said to his son, "Did you see that, Lieutenant General Xia? He once pushed my wheelchair for me." Of course, the son believed his father because he had seen a photo of his father and Lieutenant General Xia when he was a soldier. More importantly, he even shook hands with Lieutenant General Xia some time ago when he was in the military and asked how his father, who always kept flowers and grass at home, was doing recently. He also asked him to remember to bring his father to Beijing to look for him when he was free. At this time, he still did not realize that Xia Jinyuan pushing his wheelchair would become the most impressive thing that T6 could boast about in the future. At this moment, T6 was sitting in a wheelchair with disdain. "Motherfucker, I'm like a cripple now. The first thing I'm going to do when I get back is smash it." He gritted his teeth and said all the way to the car. Chapter 53-57. Behind him, Yiqian was laughing so hard that his stomach hurt. T6 felt that being in a wheelchair was a stain in his life. That was because almost all of his comrades in the Snowfield Brigade had been hospitalized before, but none of them had been discharged from the hospital in a wheelchair like T6. That was why T6 hated him to the core. Hold it in, comrade. When it came to enduring humiliation, you had to hold it in. You couldn't let all your efforts go to waste. Xia Jinyuan, who was pushing the wheelchair, held it in until a few of the veins on his forehead popped. When they got out of the inpatient department, there was a downward slope. T6 was still nagging about smashing the wheelchair. Xia Jinyuan, who could no longer hold it in, said with a cold expression, "If you keep spouting nonsense, I'll make you slide all the way down." After that, he really let go of the wheelchair. The wheelchair really slid forward. T6 shouted, but Xia Jinyuan quickly grabbed the wheelchair's armrest. With such a threat, T6 finally stopped saying anything. Meanwhile, K7, who was holding a bottle of medicine, walked beside him and secretly kept an eye on their surroundings. After they got out of the hospital, they hailed a taxi. When Will, who had sent over half of the commission in the morning, learned that T6 would be discharged in the afternoon, he immediately expressed that he could send a car to pick T6 up. However, Xia Jinyuan refused. The group of 4 took a taxi and headed straight to the hotel. The taxi driver was a very talkative Melbournian man. When the car drove past a street office, he looked around and chatted with the passengers. "You guys are tourists, right? You'll have to be more careful from now on. We have a very powerful person here. His factory has been destroyed, and his men are everywhere now. There was even a gunfight this afternoon in the suburbs. It made us all very careful and worried that something might happen." Then the driver let out a long sigh. "Drug prohibition in our country is really too difficult. They even dared to kill the police and the mayor, so our government has no way of stopping them." After saying that, he suddenly turned his head and looked at the tourist who had just gotten into the car and took out an address and said in simple English that they were going there. He shrugged and chuckled. "You guys definitely couldn't hear what I said just now. I only dare to speak in front of you guys." The corners of the T6 combatant's mouth twitched. "Sorry, brother," he could still understand. Yiqian was silent for a while before he spoke in English. "It's the most difficult country in the world to ban drugs. It's also the country where drug traffickers kill the most people. When you walk on the street, you'll be shot in the head. When you enter the supermarket, you'll be stabbed in the chest. Some are even crueler. They'll cut off your head and wrap it in white plastic before hanging it at the door of the victim's home. Talking about drugs in Melbourne is equivalent to having a date with death. Drugs and guns were rampant in this country. Some public officials even took advantage of their position to open the door for drug dealers. They even became the drug dealers' informants. As long as the anti-drug police took any action, the drug dealers would immediately know. They would go crazy and come up with a scheme within a scheme, shooting all the police officers who came to stop the drug. The evil forces of Melbourne were so rampant that they dared to kill anyone who dared to talk about prohibition. When the car arrived at the hotel, the sun had completely lost its last rays. Dusk had just begun, and only a smoky green light shrouded the city that was about to welcome night. The hotel was very luxurious. The expensive crystal lights emitted a bright light that illuminated the entire hotel lobby. However, the hotel was not big and could not compare to the five-star hotels in the country at all. It was divided into the lobby and clubhouse on the first 4 floors and the hotel garden behind it. The semi-arc hotel surrounded the garden, and together with the garden in front of the hotel, the entire hotel was designed with a circular layout. It was also a layout that was very convenient to be monitored. Chapter 53-58. G3 and Z7 were already waiting at the entrance of the hotel. Yiqian, who was sitting in front, got out of the car first, followed by Xia Jinyuan and then K7. After Xia Jinyuan got out of the car, he opened the trunk of the taxi and took out a foldable wheelchair. He pushed the wheelchair to his 2 comrades who were helping T6 out of the car. T6 once again endured the humiliation and got into the wheelchair. G3 and Z7, who were very respectful, burst out laughing. T6 felt that their comradeship had come to an end. This time, G3 was in charge of pushing the wheelchair. After taking over the wheelchair, he whispered something into T6's ear. T6's face contorted as he grinned widely. G3 said, "Brother, welcome back to the team." Z7 and Baihe reached out and shook T6's hand before patting him on the shoulder. There was no need to say anything as everything was self-evident. There was no need for too many words or actions. Often, just an action or a sentence was enough to express everything. V8 did not appear. Xia Jinyuan told, that V8 had gone outside to check on the situation. Noah only knew that one of the mercenaries had not returned. The 7 of them were clearly monitored by Noah from the moment they met to the moment they entered the hotel elevator. Then, they all entered Z7's room. Out of the 8 of them, only Z7 and T6 rooms were the safest. They were all taken care of by Z7 using his technology. Noah could see them enter the room and see exactly where they were sitting in the room. However, all the images he saw were based on Z7's existing images and processed them for Noah to see using his technology. K7 gently placed the medical supplies he brought back from the hospital on the table in the living room. He glanced in the direction where T6 was sitting and quietly walked over to his comrade's side. Noah also saw the same thing. Following that, Noah saw the 8 mercenaries decide to celebrate by drinking red wine, champagne, and whiskey. In the end, all 7 of them, including the injured T6, started drinking. All of them were swaying around and looking drunk. Noah, who had been guarding them for 2 hours, rubbed his glabella and instructed the people around him, "Keep an eye on them. Let me know when they wake up." The sight of a group of drunkards gave him a headache. The video became still. Xia Jinyuan took out a tissue and wiped the alcohol that had spilled on him. He asked his comrade who had stayed behind at the hotel, "Have there been any movements from the targets in the hotel?" Z7 spread his hands and said, "Nope. These people are very vigilant. We've been observing them for a few days." Hearing Z7's reply, Xia Jinyuan said calmly, "Let's just wait and see. The more they are, the bigger targets. Their leader is and the others is, and the others is, and the others is. Their faces gradually, and the others is ants, and it says ants and theirs, S's in the Mola's evil forces are well known in the world. If the government dares to do anything to them, they'll do it on the 10th and 15th of every month. If the government dares to do anything to them, they'll do it 10 times more. T6 then told them what he had heard from the taxi driver. Cyril is also one of the most famous evil forces in Mola. With his ability, I don't doubt that he'll find out that we're behind this. It's safer for me to stay in the hospital. If I stay in the hotel, it'll be safer with Noah's men there. Z7 frowned. If Cyril really finds out that we're behind this, Noah can choose to watch from the sidelines. He won't have to do anything. Chapter 53-59. After Z7 mentioned the main point, G3, T6, K7, and by he all looked at Xia Jinyuan. They also glanced at Yi Qian. Their intuition told them that the two of them must have already come up with a solution to the main point raised by Z7. Q King was in control of the overall battle strategy, while Qing Niao was meticulous. She could think of details that Q King might not have thought of. The two of them worked together seamlessly, and the battle deployment they came up with didn't even need to be supplemented by other comrades. They knew each other too well. Xia Jinyuan smiled and looked at Yi Qian, indicating for her to speak. Yi Qian smiled. So, we still need to let Cyril know that we're in contact with Will and Noah's existence. As for how to let Cyril know about Noah's existence, we can borrow Will's hand. She slowly explained the plan that she and Xia Jinyuan had discussed. We realized that Will doesn't trust Noah. He even hates him. We can use this to pull Will to our side and then work together with Will. Of course, before we work with him, we have to let him know that we're fighting with Noah's people. Otherwise, how can we make Will believe that we'll help him get rid of Noah? Also, we need to rescue Alice Chung, who might be in Noah's hands. I believe that we'll be very happy to see us get rid of Noah. After the plan was revealed, her comrades nodded. That's right, they could definitely sow discord. Which faction does Noah represent? T6 asked. He had missed some of the discussions while he was unconscious, and he had a slight concussion. Xia Jinyuan and Yi Qian also didn't tell him the points that his comrades in the operating room had guessed. This included which faction Noah represented. Noah is a soldier, so there's a 90% chance that he's backed by a country that imprisons scientists. Xia Jinyuan said calmly. According to the T6 combatant's voice, when he heard Alice Chung being abducted again before he fainted from his injuries, he didn't feel any fear, only anger. I suspect that Alice Chung knows Noah. In order to let the people on the surveillance camera see him drinking and getting drunk, Xia Jinyuan really did drink a few glasses of wine for himself. Now that he was a little tipsy, his jade-like face was a little flushed. He was already extremely handsome, so with the flush on his face, he was even more beautiful than a woman. The beauty was very beautiful, but her expression wasn't too good. There was a cold sharpness between her brows. Even if she knew he was handsome, she didn't dare to look at him too much. Yi Qian quietly opened the bottle of mineral water he had prepared for the hotel and drank half of it. Other people would be afraid of him because of the coldness in his eyes, but as his girlfriend, she was not afraid. Therefore, she was shocked by his good looks again. After drinking half the bottle of water, Yi Qian listened to him continue. Xia Jinyuan didn't notice Yi Qian's momentary loss of composure. He took the opportunity to tell him about his suspicions, as well as all the clues he had put together. I'm guessing that Alice Chung herself is a bait. How did she escape from the country's surveillance to Melbourne with her son? It's impossible for an individual to have such great ability. What's more, the people watching her are from the country. Why would they let her escape with her child? He had just started, but it made everyone's hearts skip a beat. That's right, this was the biggest problem. She doesn't have such great ability, so there's only one guess. The country deliberately let her go and arranged for her to come to Melbourne. Deliberately let her come to Melbourne? There were some people who didn't quite understand. Yi Qian frowned slightly. Chapter 5360. Xia Jinyuan did not tell Yi Jian in advance about the clues that he had pieced together, because he was also constantly thinking and perfecting them. When he heard the taxi driver say that Melbourne was in chaos and that the evil forces were so rampant that they could go against the government, Xia Jinyuan's thoughts that had not been clear before seemed to have cleared up, and he connected all the clues that could not be connected. Melbourne is very chaotic, and there are many possibilities. However, it is not as chaotic as war-torn countries. There is a certain degree of order amidst the chaos. In addition, Alice Cheng's good friend, Will, is in Melbourne. Then, arranging for Alice Chung to come to Melbourne was the best choice. You must be wondering why Melbourne was chosen as the best choice. His comrades nodded. The T6 combatant's eyes were as bright as a child's and filled with a thirst for knowledge. On the other hand, Yi Qian was deep in thought. Why? It was mainly because of the chaos. In a country where guns are rampant and evil forces are rampant, even if there are forces from outside, they will not attract attention. For example, if Noah and the others entered Melbourne and suddenly pulled out their guns one day, it would definitely not be news in Melbourne. For example, after the country found out that they needed to rescue the scientist's wife and son, in order to make the scientist return wholeheartedly, they would definitely come to rescue the scientist. Then, this country would definitely not search for the scientist on a large scale and might disguise themselves to enter Melbourne. Then, everyone understood what was going on. Indeed, Melbourne was too suitable for shooting and snatching people. Noah's identity is basically clear, so it's convenient for Cyril to focus on Noah and make him think that Noah sent people to destroy his underground factory and that we are on Noah's side. At this moment, G3 spoke slowly with a smile. Then, why would Cyril think that we are on Noah's side? That would require Will to come forward. That's right. The corner of Xia Jinyuan's mouth curled into a faint sneer as he glanced at a hidden probe in the room. With an even colder smile, he said, "Using Alice Chung to bait us also means that the country that imprisoned the scientist isn't even sure if our country knows about this matter. Also, they are very confident in their own strength. They think that as long as they send people and our country sends people, when the two sides meet in Melbourne, their country will definitely win and our country will be defeated. If our country is defeated, their country can immediately tell the scientist that a country that is so incompetent that they can't even save his wife and son, why should they return to the country to serve? To the outside world, they can take the opportunity to threaten our country. You must know that their country has always been on guard against our country. They did not want our country to rise. At this point, the entire route, Yi Jian, who understood everything, raised her hand. I'm sorry, but I'd like to add 2 points to Alice Chung. Xia Jinyuan raised his eyebrows and motioned for her to continue. Alice Chung did have a lot of questions, and his little fox should have already guessed it. Why would Alice Chung listen to the country's arrangements? I suspect 2 things. Yi Qian, who had a clear mind, said calmly. First, she might have listened to the arrangements because of her child. Second, she was a spy sent by the country to the scientist because the scientist did not tell anyone that he wanted to return to the country. He only told his wife that he wanted to go on a trip. The scientist had not accompanied his family on a trip for 6 years. After the project was successful, he suddenly said that he wanted to go on a trip. His wife became suspicious and reported it to the higher-ups. That was why the scientist was imprisoned the night before he left. Chapter 53:61. Combined with what Xia Jinyuan had said, Yi Qian sorted out the suspicions he had in his heart and came up with what he had just said. T6 wiped his face and turned to look at Z7. Bro, is there a peephole in the bathroom? No, no problem. Z7 thought he wanted to go to the bathroom. Do you need a hand? Z7 lifted his leg to help him up. No, no need. T6 refused. He was just agitated and needed to wash his face to clear his mind. They both had the same brain, but why was there such a big difference? In the future, he and Xia Jiasen's children would have to spend time with Q King and Qing Yao's children. He should be able to get some intelligence from them. T6 slowly got up and walked to the bathroom to wash his face before slowly sitting back down. It was almost time for everyone to leave. Z7 sent their problems back to China via email, and cleaned it up without leaving any traces. The few of them left to carry out the next step of the battle plan. China received an email from Z7. After it was deciphered, a complete email appeared on Commander-in-Chief Xia's desk. Commander-in-Chief Xia did not only have one email in his hands, he also had another email. Both emails were personally delivered by Major General Yang 1 hour after the other. After reading it, Commander-in-Chief Xia smiled, even though he was very worried about the soldiers who were going to the two countries to entertain them. The Special Forces of the Snowfield Brigade had never disappointed. They had outstanding abilities, outstanding intelligence, and their execution ability had surprised people time and time again. They all thought of the same problem, the same point, and even the questions they suspected were similar. They are all talents, all talents. Commander-in-Chief Xia sighed. It was the country's fortune to have them. Major General Yang had read both emails. He was proud of his soldiers. They're all a group of hot-blooded young people. Their rare tacit understanding allows them to maintain a high level of tacit understanding even when they're operating in two different countries. Now, we can basically confirm that Alice is a spy sent by the country to stay by the scientist's side. The scientist's plan to return to China failed because of his lover's snitch. However, Alice Cheng's rescue plan still needs to continue. Xia Jinyuan's team will divert some of the country's attention so that the other team can take action. Xia Jinyuan's team was only able to rescue Alice Cheng after the scientist secretly rescued her. Therefore, their team was in greater danger. Once the government found out that the scientist had been rescued, they would definitely continue to detain Alice Cheng to force the scientist to show up. In that case, Xia Jinyuan and his team would undoubtedly face many difficulties and dangers. The best solution would be to immediately rescue Alice Cheng before the scientists were discovered by the country. The connection between the two sides required the connection between the two sides. Major General Yang thought for a while and said, "It's not difficult to contact both sides. The biggest problem is when the other team can rescue the scientist." Xia Jinyuan's team has a relatively low rescue difficulty index. Their difficulty lies in prolonging the rescue time. After all, what was an important person who could allow Xia Jinyuan's team to continue staying in Melabon as mercenaries? Commander-in-Chief Xia didn't find it difficult. Cyril let him out to cause trouble. He can help them to prolong the rescue time. Inform them to slowly deal with Cyril before they receive news of the other team rescuing the scientist. Chapter 5362. Commander-in-Chief Xia had always been good at taking action. He was strict in his management and resolute in handling matters. Once he made the decision, he let Major General Yang make the arrangements. "Yes, I'll inform them right away." Major General Yang, who thought it was feasible, immediately contacted the embassy. Through the embassy, he contacted Xia Jinyuan and gave him the contact information for the other team. At this time, Xia Jinyuan just came out of the shower. Yi Qian was not in the room. She went to the hotel's swimming pool and took a shower before coming out. She had no choice. Noah and the others were so crazy that they even installed surveillance cameras in her and Xia Jinyuan's presidential suite. Z7 said that their only conscience was that they could only see the top half of their bodies and not the bottom half. They could, but Yi Qian could not. When Yi Qian came out of the swimming pool, the two beds were covered with blankets. It looked like the man on top and the woman on the bottom, one on top, one on bottom, one on top, one on bottom, one on top, one on top, one on bottom, 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 one on bottom. It was so irritating that the guys watching them screamed. How would they solve the problem in the end? In fact, Xia Jinyuan did not do anything indescribable. He just hid under the blankets to exercise and told Yi Qian everything about the other team. His little fox had a very smart brain. When the two of them worked together, they were so close that they could feel the tacit understanding in the depths of their souls. Every time he saw her saying the details that he had thought of, Xia Jinyuan felt that the depths of his soul were trembling because of her. Logically speaking, The conversation should have ended in at most 10 minutes, but Yi Qian watched him hide under the blankets for almost an hour before coming out. Yi Qian did not know why, but as a man, Comrade Xian knew very well. Although they hid under the blankets, because they had something else to do, the guys who were watching them would only think that they were doing something intimate. As a man, he could not embarrass himself because of this. After an hour, he saved his dignity as a man. The guys who were watching them waited until Xia Jinyuan came out and turned off the lights. They all felt that it was a pity and did not get too close to the screen to watch. The next day, Xia Jinyuan told his comrades about the other team's situation in the gym. With the music in the gym, they communicated in secret until it came over. Will, who was also under surveillance, was so mentally exhausted that he looked and rubbed his temples to relieve his headache. Did your partners find any clues? A few days have passed. Xia Jinyuan cut a piece of steak and ate it slowly. After finishing a small piece, he put down his knife and looked around before whispering to Will. Mr. Will, are you sure Cyril didn't find us? But even... Will's knife slid to the side. The knife cut through the porcelain plate, making a sharp sound. He calmed himself down and asked, how do you feel? What's going on? I don't understand what you're trying to say. They must have found out about Noah. God, these mercenaries are really good. They felt that someone was watching them from the moment they entered the hotel. For some reason, Will became excited. Chapter 5363. Will was too excited. Although he hit it very well, and even his expression became more serious than before, Xia Jinyuan did not miss the light that burst out from his eyes in that instant. Xia Jinyuan, who was cutting the steak, lowered his head and carefully cut a small piece of steak for himself. Sitting opposite him, Will realized that the mercenary sitting opposite him was actually very handsome. You, which country are you from? Will couldn't help but ask, why are you so powerful? Their information did not show their nationality, only their experience on the battlefield and what they had done. Will actually knew very little about mercenaries. Xia Jinyuan looked up and revealed a bloodthirsty and cruel smile. Because we killed a lot of people, that's why we're so powerful and want to make more money. Mr. Will, are you suspecting that we won't be able to rescue Alice Chung? The best way to avoid the topic was naturally to change the topic to something that the other party was concerned about. Will immediately shook his head. No, I'm not. He raised his hand, put his fist against his chin, and fell into deep thought. About a few minutes later, Will said in a low voice, come to think of it, the hotel you're staying in can really be investigated. Maybe you've been targeted by Cyril for a long time, but you just didn't realize it. I'll ask someone to inquire about the situation of this hotel and see if we can find anything. Okay, that's settled. We'll carry out the investigation at the same time. If there's any news, we'll call each other, Xia Jinyuan said. Will, who looked very cautious, glanced behind Xia Jinyuan. Someone's face darkened and glanced at him in the direction of the restaurant's entrance. Will, who had a gloomy look in his eyes, looked away and cut the steak on his plate. Then I'll leave now, in case Cyril finds out that I'm with you. Xia Jinyuan nodded. Okay, we'll contact you if we have any news, Mr. Will. There was the sound of the dining chair being gently pulled open. Will strode away, his tall figure carrying a trace of anger. Of course, this trace of anger was not because of Xia Jinyuan, but because of the white man who stood up after him. Xia Jinyuan picked up the glass full of lemonade and drank it. He narrowed his eyes slightly and looked at the Caucasian man who left with Will with a cold smile. Whose hands would Alice Chung be in? She's 100% in Noah's hands. The country behind Noah was now anxious to lure the Chinese people out so that they could jump into their trap. Looking at the time, Xia Jinyuan saw that there was still half an hour before the appointed meeting at the embassy. Xia Jinyuan had been exhausted recently, so he had to replenish his body. Xia Jinyuan's hand. He told her to order whatever she wanted to eat, and if she was bored. Now that they were in the support team, they needed to wait for the latest news from the other team that was going to rescue the scientists. Only then could they act. Xia Jinyuan took out his phone and sent a text message to Yi Qian. Yi Qian, who had just gotten into the car, heard the text message notification. She took out her phone and looked at it. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly as she replied, "Not bad. You've got two tails." After leaving the hotel, Yi Qian had been walking along the street. In her previous life, she would always pay attention to her surroundings so that she could escape immediately if she encountered any trouble. She was still used to it. Chapter 5364. Xia Jinyuan laughed when he saw her message. She didn't even ask where she was. She must be outside. Otherwise, how could she shake off two tails? Then you've provoked them. Be careful that they don't send another four to you. He and Yi Qian rarely sent messages back and forth. Usually, when Yi Qian sent him a message, a long time would have passed by the time he saw it. It was normal for it to take a few days or even a few months. When he sent a message to Yi Qian, he wouldn't immediately receive a reply from Yi Qian. Usually, it would take about a week before he received a reply from her. It couldn't be helped. The military academy had strict regulations, and students were not allowed to bring mobile phones with them. They had been in a relationship for many years. The longest time they had spent together was last year. They were both in the same unit. One trained male soldiers, while the other trained female soldiers. They could see each other every day. Even though it was only half a year, they were very satisfied. Time was too short, and it wasn't easy for them to be together. They cherished every minute and second. Yi Qian saw his message and immediately replied. She pursed her lips and smiled softly. "That's good. You'll be safe if they all turn their attention to me." During the day, the special forces of the Snowfield Brigade split up in order to let Xia Jinyuan and the people from the embassy meet each other. Xia Jinyuan laughed and replied while drinking water. "Send me the address when you see it. I'll accompany you to see the scenery of Melbourne. Although the security is chaotic, the scenery is good." He leisurely replied to the message, but the spy who was watching him couldn't continue. After sitting for another 5 minutes, he saw that the waiter had served another steak. The spy gritted his teeth and left to pay the bill expressionlessly. He finally understood why the colonel said that although this group of mercenaries looked like Chinese people, they weren't sent by China. The Chinese side is a poor and cunning country. How could they send someone with high combat power who looked stupid? Half an hour later, Xia Jinyuan received a message from the embassy. He paid the bill and left. He waited for a while at the entrance of the restaurant before getting into a taxi. The driver was none other than the staff of the embassy who had met them when they arrived in Melbourne. He was a scout. The embassy would definitely know if there was any news about Cyril, if he had any tricks up his sleeve, and if he had contacted the local police. Since Xia Jinyuan wanted to pit Cyril against Noah, he had to know Cyril's movements first. Cyril is ruthless and extremely vengeful. If you offend him, he will take revenge, and after the staff member who used to be a scout finished speaking, Xia Jinyuan immediately understood why Cyril had first suspected the Melbourne police. This month, the president of Melbourne was re-elected. The first sentence of his speech was, "I'm still alive. I can continue to stand here and fight with them." The president was referring to his evil forces like Cyril. The president said that he was still alive, and he was indeed lucky. Since the election in September, hundreds of politicians have been assassinated, including some members of the president's side. All the members of the Senate and the House of Representatives were in danger. When they went out, there was a long line of bodyguards. Even so, it wasn't 100% safe. What about now? Is Cyril still suspecting the police? Xia Jinyuan asked in a low voice. Chapter 5365. He had been working in Mellabon for 4 years, and these 4 years were the 4 years when Mellabon's rival drug gangs had experienced explosive growth. The president, who had been re-elected, had wanted to take advantage of these drug gangs to kill each other. He had mobilized the army to the border to fight against the drug gangs. In the end, not only did he not achieve the desired effect, but he had also added fuel to the fire, causing civilians to die in the conflict. They did not fight against the army of Mellabon. They used another method to fight against the army of Mellabon. so that the president would retreat and not get involved in the affairs of the drug gangs. In the second half of last year, it was not known if the drug gangs had reached a consensus, but they had evolved the internal war into a battle against the government, causing the whole of Melbourne to fall into panic again. These drug dealers were ruthless. As long as they thought that the person was harmful to their interests, they would never give the person a chance to explain. They would kill the person without saying a word. The reason why the staff repeatedly reminded Xia Jinyuan and the others to pay attention to their safety was also the reason. As soon as Cyril's subordinates discovered even the slightest trace of the destruction of his underground factory, he would unleash his vengeance like a madman. He would list all suspicious targets as targets to be killed, and as long as he knew even the slightest bit of information, another bloodbath would ensue. The police could not come forward at all. In other words, they were more willing to see this kind of scene of killing each other. Using the discord between drug dealers to defeat the other side, it was undoubtedly one less cancer for the police. Of course, the police were happy to see such a situation. You have a special identity now, and you enter Melbourne through illegal means. Once you're discovered by Cyril, you will face a desperate situation where you will have no way out and no reinforcements in front of you. Even if the country that has wiped away all of your identities knows that you are in danger, they will not be able to send reinforcements. The staff, who was a scout, knew the identity of a young man who was talking to him. He was a Special Forces soldier from a special force in the country. Their identity here was equivalent to a death soldier. In the end, they could not expose their identity, even if they were once glorious. They were just illegal mercenaries who died. It was impossible for the Melbourne police to face Cyril's drug gangs for an illegal mercenary. Xia Jinyuan said coldly, "Well, we will pay attention. If you know anything about Cyril's movements, please inform us in time." In the face of such a powerful drug cartel, even the police of a country didn't dare to easily face it, let alone the aid of them. Therefore, he planned to draw Cyril's attention to Noah. In addition, the car driven by the staff member ran over several speed bumps in succession, and his words were temporarily interrupted. It was only when the car continued to move forward steadily that he spoke again. The scientists under house arrest are researching nuclear energy. Now, it's not just our country that knows about this. At this time, several international terrorist organizations already know about this. Xia Jinyuan's eyes suddenly darkened. How did the terrorist organization find out? When did this happen? Last night, they were still in contact with each other, but they didn't inform them of such serious news. Could it be? I only found out when I came here. The news should have been spread last night or this morning. Now, not only do we need to find scientists, but more and more terrorist organizations and hostile forces will be involved in this battle. Chapter 5366. This change came too suddenly. Not only did Xia Jinyuan not expect it, even the country did not expect it. How could it have been leaked? Xia Jinyuan's eyes darkened. He pursed his thin lips, and his expression was as sharp as a knife. Have you found out where the news came from? We just received the news. It will take some time to find out where the news came from. Now, what we're most worried about is you. The participation of these powerful terrorist organizations and hostile forces with huge intelligence organizations and arms means that the opponents you are facing are no longer the few that you know. There may be more like poisonous snakes lurking in the dark, waiting for an opportunity to strike. After a night of fermentation, your risk factor has skyrocketed. No one can predict what kind of danger you will encounter. What happened 2 days ago made the ambassador very worried. Fortunately, no comrade was sacrificed. As for the injured comrade, let him rest for the time being. Don't underestimate Melbourne and Cyril's drug traffickers. They're many times more powerful than the drug traffickers in the Golden Triangle. Xia Jinyuan nodded. The staff's reminder was right. They were facing more and more difficulties. They had to rescue the scientists before other forces. It was strange. The country had always liked to research all kinds of things in private. They often suspected some countries of nuclear weapons research in the international community. In fact, they had never given up on nuclear weapons research in private. They were a typical example of a tyrannical mindset. Logically speaking, it was impossible for the scientists who were researching nuclear weapons to be known to the outside world. Once the outside world knew, it was equivalent to telling the world that they were conducting nuclear research. Although the country had always been a gangster and had slapped itself in the face many times, nuclear research was something that all countries in the world would pay attention to. How could the country leak the news? Xia Jinyuan lowered his eyes slightly. We will make the appropriate arrangements on our side. Please rest assured, Ambassador. Cyril's movements are. Before he finished speaking, the phone in his pocket suddenly vibrated. The driver was so cautious that he even stopped breathing and turned on the car radio. A passionate song echoed in the car. The caller was none other than Will, who had met Xia Jinyuan not long ago. Will's voice sounded urgent. I have news. A friend of mine called me and said that he has news of Alice Chung. He's waiting for me at the train station. I'm on my way there now. Come with me. There is only one train station in Melbourne, and it was not the main train station for the entire country. It was only the starting point for commuter trains to nearby areas. Xia Jinyuan knew the exact location even without Will telling him. Okay, I'll be right there. Okay, as soon as possible. Please be quick. After that, he quickly hung up the phone. After putting the phone aside, he said to Noah, who was sitting in front of him, he's on his way to the train station now. Aren't you going there? Noah was very satisfied with Will's cooperation. Seeing that Will was not angry when he looked at him with a sour face, he smiled politely and said, You only need to do your own thing. You don't need to know about our affairs. Okay, well, we'll send you to the train station now. Remember, Will, you and your family won't be in any danger as long as you cooperate with us. Go, good luck. Chapter 5367. The Melbourne train station was located southeast of the city center. The space inside the station had been transformed into a shopping center, and it was one of the busiest places in Melbourne. Many tourists who came to Melbourne would come to the train station to take photos as souvenirs, and it had unknowingly become a landmark. Every day, there was a sea of people there, and it was extremely crowded and chaotic. For this reason, the current government even mobilized the police to maintain order and ensure the normal operation of the train station and the safety of citizens and tourists. However, for Melbourne, where everyone carried guns, this was obviously a drop in the bucket. It was far from enough. Violent incidents emerged one after another, and bloodshed continued unabated. Seeing that the results were not great, the authorities turned a blind eye to it and let it go with the flow. Some violent incidents were also left unresolved. The tourists also knew that the train station was prosperous and dangerous, but the danger was not enough to stop them. Even though they knew there were tigers in the mountains, they still preferred the train. Yi Qian, who was strolling on the pedestrian streets of a foreign country, received a call from Xia Jinyuan. He smiled and picked up the phone. When he hung up the phone, his expression was solemn and cold without a hint of a smile. She no longer lingered on the pedestrian street. After hailing a taxi, she immediately headed towards the train station. The hotel they were staying at was not in the same direction as the train station, and the two of them were not in the same direction. However, it took about 45 minutes to get to the train station. Will arrived earlier than the two of them. Xia Jinyuan did not arrive in the usual time, so Will suddenly asked him to go to the train station. Xia Jinyuan said okay, but he was alarmed. Xia Jinyuan, who was familiar with Melbourne, told Yi Qian an address close to the train station. The two of them met there first, and then went to see Will together. While he was still on the phone with Yi Qian, Xia Jinyuan thought that he needed to contact V8, who had been secretly watching him, to ask him if there was anything going on. Unexpectedly, V8's call came just as he ended the call with Yi Qian. F***, you finally got through. As soon as the call was connected, V8's relieved voice came through. Q King, I have a situation here. Noah removed all the spies who were monitoring you and even had the surveillance cameras in all our rooms taken away. There's something wrong here. Why did he suddenly change his mind? V8's information came just in time. Noah's identity was the same as his. They both entered Melbourne for a mission. From Noah's point of view, Xia Jinyuan could only guess two things. First, Noah suspected their identities. Secondly, Noah did not suspect their identities. Before they checked into the hotel, Noah must have been suspicious of their identities, so he kept probing and sent people to monitor them, including the surveillance cameras in their rooms. At what point would he stop watching them? When he no longer suspected their identities, they would no longer monitor them. Therefore, he decided to withdraw his spies and the surveillance cameras. Why did he suddenly believe it? Something must have happened to make Noah believe that the 8 of them were indeed mercenaries and not people sent by the Chinese to rescue Alice Chung. Could it be? All of a sudden, Xia Jinyuan's expression darkened. He immediately said to the driver, "Quick, contact the ambassador and ask him to inform the country immediately that another team is in danger." V8, who was on the other end of the phone, was shocked when he heard this. What's wrong? What's wrong? Why did he suddenly say that the other team is in danger? What the F***CK is going on now? I didn't say anything just now. Chapter 5368. V8 was shocked, and so was the driver. He didn't dare to delay any further and immediately called the ambassador. Xia Jinyuan still hadn't ended the call with V8. When the driver's phone was connected, he picked it up and told him his guess as fast as he could. The ambassador's face darkened when he received the call. Okay, I got it. Okay, got it. Okay, I'll contact China right away. You must take good care of yourselves. Don't let anything go wrong. Xia Jinyuan replied with an okay and hung up the phone. He then returned the phone to the driver. Under what circumstances would he no longer suspect their identities? They must have found out that China had sent people to rescue the scientist, so they assumed that China had not sent anyone to rescue Alice Chung. Which was more important, a nuclear scientist or an ordinary housewife? She must be a nuclear scientist. Why did the country release Alice Chung to Melbourne? Because they needed to catch the Chinese people. Now that they had confirmed that they had found traces of the Chinese people in China, they could completely give up on Alice Chung. Alice Chung was just a bait. Now that this bait was no longer needed, Noah and the others didn't need to fully monitor all the targets they suspected. As for the sudden exposure of the scientist's identity, it was also because of China's means. They had found out that China had sent people to rescue the scientist, so they had achieved their goal. In order to give China a bigger headache, they might as well make things worse. Anyway, the scientist was still in their hands. As long as the scientist was there, no matter how chaotic the outside world was, it had nothing to do with China. It was China's fault for sending people over, and China's fault for rescuing the scientist. After listening to the whole story, V8's back was covered in cold sweat. These bastards are so F***king ruthless. There's no other country that's better at scheming than them. Xia Jinyuan was frighteningly calm after thinking of the key points. Of course they need a plan for their own country, just like we all need a plan for our own country. Let's see who will be the winner in this round. Xia Jinyuan was not surprised by China's actions. They naturally needed to think for their own country, so there was nothing strange about their various schemes. Angry? Furious? There was no need for that. What they were doing now wasn't it also one trap after another? Perhaps the people of that country would also scold them for being cunning. There's no one keeping an eye on the hotel now. You can come out and move around a little, but you can't show your face. Continue to keep an eye on Noah. Tell G3 and Z7 to come to the train station. You and K7 stay in the hotel. Xia Jinyuan said to V8 before ending the call. What happened next was out of Xia Jinyuan's control. The driver held the steering wheel tightly with one hand and raised his other hand to wipe the sweat on his forehead. They're too cunning. If we had been a little careless, we would have been swallowed by these robbers and not even our dregs would have been left. Xia Jinyuan, whose face was so gloomy that water could drip out of it, did not answer the staff. His fingers unconsciously tapped on the seat a few times, and he said to the staff, "Brother, go to the front and let me down. I'll take another car. I can send you there." The staff member seemed to have realized something, And he answered very seriously, "There's still some distance to the train station." You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.